Backstage Sessions.
Yeah, man.
I love that they named it that. One of the things I was telling Sass I'm really curious about with your, because I just want to just start. I've been watching you for many years. I actually got to see you with Chris Cornell's band when you played in Jersey once. Uh,
Oh, cool.
yeah, it was I think Juliet and the Licks were opening.
Yeah, Juliet Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just awesome. But
Oh,
you guys have the air conditioning off in the room? Was that like a thing for his
in the
vocal?
venue?
Yeah,
I think I remember the gig you're talking about.
really? Oh,
We should save this for the
okay,
when we
good.
go live. I'll
Good.
tell you because I think I remember the night. Was it kind of a Roadhouse looking sort of bar? Like
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
I rem-
yeah.
it
It's
was so
one of the
hot.
wider venues. It's the
Yeah,
Starland Ballroom, and
right.
it's
I remember this gig, man.
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
wow, that's
and I
cool.
remember how hot it was. Oh God, it was
Yeah,
hot.
they built it in like the middle of a swamp or so. I mean, it just looks like there should be no venue there. But
But it was fun.
yeah, I have some really I guess from the experience, so many things to not only just like ask you about, but just to say thanks because that was such a really special show.
Oh, thanks, man. I remember it being a special show. Actually, that's one of the we did a lot of gigs, but I remember the one you're talking about. There's many that I'll see photos or video, and I'm like, I do not remember being there. Like at that
Yeah, yeah,
venue.
sure.
But that one I remember. I can remember the stage, and I remember how hot it was, and how we probably all took our shirts off, and like we're standing in puddles of sweat.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what was funny was I used to tour with a band where the singer uh, would request no air conditioning, and we
Yeah.
did a summer tour in like Texas.
Yeah.
And
You're right.
we have air conditioning in the van, and it was just we all just kind of got. I mean, I don't personally like air conditioning in my face anyway because it dries out my throat, and if I'm singing backup or something, you don't want
When it
that.
gets to the point where the crowd is going to collapse, where it's like, dude, we got to turn on the air.
Right. No, and I guess I can't. I want to save one of the most impressive things you guys did was closing with Slaves and Bulldozers.
Oh yeah.
That was
Yeah.
just like that's already like I think like a high G over middle C vocal note that no one should be able to hit, and he does it at the end. Oh, I was like moved. Great, just going for it.
Yeah, man.
Well, are you? I saw you had a new coffee machine. Maybe
Oh, dude, I fired it up right now.
Oh,
Got a double lungo situation going here.
are you more of an espresso type of fan, or?
I just make, I've got a decent like Italian drip machine at home.
Yeah.
But here we got this nice, decent Italian espresso machine, so it's pretty great. So I'm getting into it. I still got to learn how to use it properly though. I'm falling off and stuff.
Yeah, do all the grind machine part and all that stuff, or is it like pods and all that?
It's not pods. Does everything where you dump the beans and it grinds everything in there. But it's but it's really really good.
Yeah,
High quality. Like it's kind of automatic, but works great. So
that's great. That's great. My wife always says if I bring our Keurig, we have the coffee one and the espresso pod one. Says if I bring either of those down to the studios in the house, she'll never see me again.
Yeah.
I got a fridge and a sink, and if I have coffee, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. It's perfect.
So when I saw you mention that, I was like, oh, this is funny because on my Instagram and all that stuff, I only really talk about the stuff I love to do, which is music and stuff with my kids. But occasionally I talk about coffee, and I love coffee. And it's
man. Me too. Good coffee is, necessary.
Yeah. I've made fast friends of being the first person to say, hey, who wants to get a cup of coffee in this new town? Let's just go explore and get it,
There you go. Yeah, get on Yelp and find the best place. Yeah.
So I think we're on. Looks like we are. So I guess I'll just say a quick hello to everyone. And thank you, Pete Thorn, for joining us here at Backstage Sessions. My name is Felipe, and I've been with Creative Exchange for a couple months now. I got in touch with them through a great friend and drummer, Michael Leisure. You may know, LA guy, plays with Walter Trout. We used to do tours together with our different bands. Awesome. And he mentioned that there was this online thing, and I've been teaching online for many years. So it was kind of cool when all the things changed, a lot of the kids were really into it. And then now when the Creative Exchange thing started, it seemed like such a welcoming situation because now we could still keep communicating and sharing stuff. And no one's gonna take my video down if I play along with the Zeppelin song, the demo, you know. But I wanted to, say thank you for being on, and also congratulations on all the amazing YouTube success. And it seems like you've just been growing and growing, and people really look to your advice on anything from equipment to, just different. I guess some of the players that you've. It's like I consider you an authority on many of the players that you play, maybe an example of their music, or you're working through their sounds, like Eddie Van Halen, and I just have a lot of guitar player friends who are always like, oh man, if I want to hear it played right, they watch you. So,
well, thanks, man, for
yeah,
saying. I appreciate it. I do the best I can. I grew up, that sort of element of what I do. I'm from Canada originally, and there was a healthy, as I'm sure there was on the East Coast of the U.S., where I guess you're from.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, there was a healthy cover band scene growing up.
Way to do it, we'll call it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right. Maybe that's the wrong choice of words, but it was many clubs in my town would have bands, like you'd roll in on a Monday and set up, or roll in on a Sunday actually, and Sunday would be the day off when there was no music going on, and then you'd set up your rig or whatever, and these bands would tour, generally with like a truck full of lights and sound, big old Martin PA and like par cans and like a full show. And so it was like a real like touring thing where bands were, they actually, you were touring with your gear, and with, it wasn't like roll in and set up a couple speakers on sticks, and it was like a full PA, lights, the whole 9 yards. And all these bands were all trying to outdo themselves, but generally speaking, they were cover bands. Sometimes they would throw in a song or two of their own if they could, but there was I can remember a guy doing a full-on Alice Cooper tribute, and he literally had like a snake, like he all the outfits, like it was crazy. And so some good friends of mine, I got to give them props. They were in a band called Click, and they were they were like the best cover band on the west side of Canada, because generally the circuit would be from Vancouver all the way to Thunder Bay, Ontario. So because from Thunder Bay it's 24 hours drive to Toronto after that. I mean, the next, so nobody would go further than Thunder Bay. So Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg, Thunder Bay, those were like and some of the smaller places in between as well. So anyways, I grew up watching these guys play, this band Click. They were so good, and they would play the Who and Led Zeppelin and Rush and all kinds of stuff, and they would just do it so well with the right sounds. And so I was just really inspired by that, and that was what I saw growing up, was like these people that could learn this material and get the sound so accurately. And so that was really influential for me. And at the same time, I also saw that if I wanted to play original music or play with the artists that big artists that were based in the US and that kind of thing, I was going to have to probably leave Canada, or at least go to Toronto, and if not there, maybe make it to LA, And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to go to LA because I was like, I just saw that it was like, okay, I want to be able to like do this on the biggest scale that I can. I want to take it to the wall. So I'm going to go to LA and figure out how to do that. So that's how I ended up where I am. And also that early education of watching these great players get the sounds, reproduce. Like I was like, you're not nothing if you can't, do, Eruption or something and play it pretty accurately and get the sounds and know why, all that. So that was my headspace when I was like 14, 15, because I was underage going to these clubs too. The drinking age in Canada was 18 in Alberta. It still is. Yeah, and they were real lax about IDing. So I was going to clubs when I was 15, 16 years old and seeing these people play, and that's that's where I was informed,
That makes sense. I grew up outside of Manhattan, and my dad got me a fake ID when I was 19 to sneak into the jazz clubs because you had to be 21. And I wanted to get as many opportunities to play with the local people coming through, or just the people that had weekly residencies. And I think I've felt that New York and LA and probably Austin, Nashville, they're all hubs for not only musicians but just art in general. People want to go out on a night and not just go to a movie. They want to go see a show. They want to see 4 or 5 bands, and they want to be able to go to 6 or 7 different places. So there's a desire, there's a demand for it. So that
Yeah, it's an expectation, especially back then. I remember getting to LA and it being exactly sort of what I thought. It was like you'd open up the LA Weekly or whatever and page to the back, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, look at all these clubs and all these bands that we're playing on." Any given night, there would be 3 or 4 bands, uh, all playing sets of original music, and like a lot of clubs. So it was not the cover thing. To find bands doing the cover thing, you literally had to go out to, Pasadena or out to, like you had to Orange County, you had to get out of LA. And in LA, it was all original bands doing their thing. So it was like, well, I guess I'm in the right place for original music and trying to bust out with either a band doing that, or the other thing that happens in LA and New York and stuff is, of course, tours based out of there. So if you want to be sideman, get on, touring gigs with people. That's where all the rehearsals seem to happen. It's in Nashville and stuff now. Like
right.
like you said, the music centers. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it was always a deciding factor in where we lived based on proximity to airports, because
Uh,
that being like a big deal. I was doing some fly dates a lot of times with one band,
yeah.
and they'd always be happy to send me to LaGuardia or Newark because they're about 20 minutes from me. But they're
Mm,
always having the hardest time with the guy who lived way in the deep heart of Pennsylvania, and the other
sure.
person who lived up on the west, it's nice places, but trying to find them a flight to a gig would be like a nightmare.
Yeah,
And
man. I mean, even Nashville's tough that way. Most people, I feel like that tour. I could be wrong, but I think most people that tour out of Nashville, it's like hubbing out on a bus out
yeah,
of there, and you're going all over the place because you can almost drive easier than, like doing one-offs and stuff. It seems like they take a bus and go because everybody knows Nashville. You got to fly to, regionally. You're like flying to Chicago or flying to Atlanta or whatever to hit one of the hubs. So there's always a connection. It's a
right.
tougher city to fly out of, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the amount of traveling I think that sometimes you get to do, which was one of the biggest selling points for even following a music career, was just getting to see these different places, is that you almost might play one place only one time ever, but something is familiar because you might go through the same airport, or you might know the same sound people from one of the other venues in that area, and
Uh-huh.
it's an interesting network of people I think that you find in the industry when you start to tour. And a lot of times it's, oh yeah, well, of course we're all from Nashville or we're all from wherever.
Yep.
So it's not by mistake that all these, hopefully, people that you have lifelong friendships with, but at least in a professional sense, they're people you're going to keep working with. You all have that in common, some kind of.
And the world gets smaller the more that you do, that's for sure. You keep meeting people and seeing the same people over and over again, for sure. And that's why it's so important. We can talk about that aspect too, but it's so important to be a good person and
Always
be a people
big deal.
person and somebody that, because you're going to see the same people over and over again. People are going to remember you if you mistreat them, or,
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. One of my first touring experiences, the boss would always say, "Be nice because we'll see these same people next year in
Yeah.
the same venue, and we're in their place." And this was always very respectful, and that was an interesting take. But yeah, that's the goal: is to keep working, is to keep seeing the same people, and
Yeah.
then remember, oh well, they're not a difficult band. Those guys are easy. That guy,
Yeah.
that drummer doesn't need 700 things in his monitor.
Right.
Little things like that. That's really cool, and I wanted to kind of lead that in to asking you about your music. I know you have a couple of solo records, and
Yeah.
obviously the sideman work. I'm sure there's many situations where you probably came up with a guitar part, or But I wanted to ask, what are the main like similarities and differences to doing your own project versus being more of a hired side person doing someone else's project?
You know, that's a great question. Doing my own record back in 2011, the first one I put out was a sort of cathartic, like it kind of sort of coincided with as my YouTube channel was growing, and
Hmm.
as people became to know me outside of maybe sideman gigs, because there was a time where it was like, if you knew my name, it was because I played with someone else,
Hmm.
uh, and that aspect of, and so I think what ends up happening many times is that a certain part of your, especially when you're younger, you'll tie your identity to somebody you're working with, or like
Sure.
an artist that you're playing with, and that's a dangerous thing to do, because it's sort of based in ego, and you're tying up your almost your worth or something with some gig you've got, and that gig can go away, and and then what do you do? So I became aware of that at some point, that I was like getting sort of like my emotions or something were getting connected to, and my worth, and essentially, like what we started out talking about was cover bands. I always keep the perspective of like, although you're certainly injecting a lot of your own personality when you get a gig with somebody, to some degree you're playing someone, I mean to a large degree you're playing someone else's music, and your job is almost as an actor to go up there and play parts, like as though it's a play, almost like you're up there reproducing parts. Many times, they might say, go off and do your own solo or something. Well, okay, now you're being creative, but your job is to recreate the parts, the tones, and it's someone else's name on the marquee, right? And so you're out there in the service of someone else, and that's an amazing thing, and it's so rewarding, and I love doing that work, and I want to continue to do that work. But it's only sort of one part. Like when you grow up and you play an instrument, it's about being creative and about, getting jazzed, playing that thing, and you want to express yourself. So putting out my own album was like this freeing experience of like, I don't have to like, I don't know. It was just like, it was like being a little kid again. Like I don't have to like tie my like I can do whatever I want. It's got my name on it, and I can write the songs. I can make it sound the way I want. Because also the other thing I did was I decided I would put it out on my own. I investigated some like small indie label stuff and distribution deals and stuff, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why would I do this? So I was like, I'm going to make the best record that I can in my little home studio with the gear that I've accumulated and learned how to use. And I'm just going to write the best songs I can and mix it. 3 songs were mixed by Bob Clearmountain, but the rest of it was done by me. And I was like, I'm just going to do this as a learning process, just do the best I can and then put it out, And it was such a putting it out and getting it out there and getting the response I got, which was really good for like, I was surprised. And it was like, I just felt so good. Like finally I'd taken mine. This is what I'm going to, I put a picture of myself on the cover. That was the stupidest picture I could find of myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's me at Sears at the photo studio in like 6th grade with my first guitar, where I was like, Mom, I want to take my guitar to, like, because we were going to do family photos, and I was like, let me take a couple pictures with my guitar. I can remember, I was 10, I think.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so here I am, like so excited with my first guitar, and I was just like, I'm gonna be a guitar player. And it was like, that's the purpose of, I call it guitar nerd, because it's like, this is what I do, and it's still what I do. I still feel like I'm 12 or 14 years old or whatever, and just jazzed about guitar. And I thought this is the most honest like expression of who I am that I can put on that, because this is where it all started. So I put that picture on the cover, and then that sort of is a sort of metaphor or something for the music, really, because it was like, I'm gonna just make the songs I want to make, and if somebody else likes it, that's cool. If they don't, that's cool too. So like speaking about LA, or I've been in many bands trying to get record deals and like doing showcases in LA, and you get up on stage and the label guys are out there, and you're like, I hope they think we're cool so we get a big record deal and we can, and they're always like looking, they're not looking for like something right, they're actually looking for something wrong, like a reason to not sign you,
right?
They're like, how people stand there and they critique.
Yeah.
Oh, the bass player doesn't look cool, or like, oh, I don't know, the singer's a little old, or like all that kind of crap, And this was the time, before, people were releasing, you kind of needed a label back then to get anywhere. So
right.
I've been through so many years of that stuff that I think finally, like, just, that's with the album cover, and I'm going to play whatever I want. I'm going to write the songs I want, and I'm just going to be me. And this is going to be an honest representation of what I feel like right now as a musician, or what I've done up to this point, and this is the best I can do. And putting that out was like this, I don't know how to describe it. It was like this weight off my back, and it was like this. I could finally just be me, for a second, and then. And I felt this like release of like not having to tie my emotions and stuff, or my value or worth or something, at least in a professional capacity, to some other person that could fire me or decide to go in another direction musically, and we don't want that kind of guitar player anymore, or whatever. It was like, because those things are going to happen.
Yeah,
when you get gigs, they're going to happen, and they can be heartbreaking if you tie too much of your emotions and stuff, and your ego really is what it's ego. And then so by just doing your own thing and having that outlet, it doesn't diminish the sideman work or that kind of stuff. It just allows you to put it in a more healthy place mentally, where it's like,
Yeah.
hey, this isn't my thing is over here, but I can go play with this person now and lend what I can lend to it in a in a much healthier. I don't know,
That makes
like,
sense. It sounds like it was very empowering
it
to,
was so empowering putting out my own. I would highly recommend people do their own thing, and like you can throw 100 things at the wall and see what sticks as a musician, like
yeah.
like do this kind of gig, do that kind of, I recommend mixing it up and being diverse, especially these days, is so important, to have a career, I think. So,
Speaking of diversity, it sounds like not only were you already playing in bands, guitar, and but you also sing. I mean, was that something you studied, vocal?
Very little, but I did have some great uh, vocal coaching over the years. Like I don't consider myself a singer really, but I do it, and I kind of have to work at it, and it's a thing that like I feel like I like to tackle new things and just sort of go head first in. So, like things like I can remember playing with Chris Cornell and him saying like, we're gonna do a hunger strike today. Who's gonna sing it with me? And I was like, I got it. And I was like secretly inside, I'm like, do I got it? Like, can I do this? Because it's hard, but like, because there's the double vocal obviously with Eddie but I'd practiced it really hard to try and because I was like, hell yeah, I want to sing that song with Chris Cornell.
Cool. That's really
So yeah, so I just did the best I could, and lo and behold, he was like, "Great!" And then we just went on and did it for the next 3 years or whatever on tour, like, and it was like, oh my god, like I don't know, and some nights I probably pulled it off better than others, but it was just like little moments like that where I try and throw myself in. Now I can remember being at MI, GIT, because I went to GIT when I first got to LA, and the great Tim Boger, who just passed away recently.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I used to play in a drumming group with Carmine. And
Oh, cool.
the
Yeah.
first time I met him, when he was still playing with Tim, and I'd never seen a better rhythm section connection. They just were
Yeah.
so like, just in tune. So yeah, I hear you. And he's a great
Tim,
singer.
he's a great singer, and he was a teacher at MI, and I learned, he's a bass player, and at MI, some of the key things I remember learning were from him. There was these classes at MI called open counseling, where you could go in and sit and just talk to teachers about kind of like we are right now. It's like almost like a vibe like this, like just riff but you'd have an instrument, sometimes jam or whatever. And so he would do an open counseling, and I can't remember if it was sort of vocal oriented. It might have been, but anyways, I would go in and sit there with him with maybe 3 or 4 other guys. They're just in a small classroom, and you could ask him questions or like, different things. And so I can remember going to do this vocal open counseling thing with him. And I learned more in that 5 minutes. He's like, I'm gonna clear my throat because I got to do this with authority now. This thing he taught me. He's like, okay. He's like, stand up. Okay, so I stand up, and he's like, okay, so your mom's across the parking lot, right? How do you get her attention? She's all the way across the parking lot, like at a shopping center or something. How do you get her attention? Do it. And I go like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, get her attention. She's way over there. How do you do it? And I go, I don't know. Like, he goes, call her name. And I go, Mom, like this, and he goes, that's not how you do it. Mom, and he goes like that. Mom, and he goes, that's how you sing. Sorry.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
And I was like, oh my God, he just screamed at me in the room, and he goes, that's how you sing, like with that kind of intention, and I was like, oh my God, wow.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I remember from a year at MI that stands out as one of the most powerful things I learned. Like, if you're going to step up to that mic, be prepared. He didn't mean always to sing loud and always to be conviction, like if you're going to mean it, you're going to go into it with intention, the same intention you do on the guitar when you bend a note or hit a chord or whatever, that becomes second nature. If vocals aren't first, in your wheelhouse, you have to approach it the same way. So that was a powerful lesson for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that makes. Like I remember beginning singing as well as out of necessity in bands to do backups, because I'd had a teacher who played. Still, I guess he does. Matt Johnson from Jeff Buckley's band.
Okay.
He and I, I studied with him for a while, and then now he was with St. Vincent. And but before that, he did a very long stint with Rufus Wainwright, and he told me the reason why he got that gig
It's a
wasn't
great gigs.
played on the record. It's that he said, I play drums 40% of the gig. 60% is doing backup vocals.
Wow, yeah.
People
That's
who
so
can,
important.
so, yeah. So he would teach you to play drums while counting, just to kind of get that muscle memory to put them both kind of almost an independent level. You can kind of
Yeah, man. It
drums on
can
auto.
make or break a gig. I mean,
Yeah, and that's what he said. He's like, two great players, one sings, one doesn't. They'll always pick the singer.
that's right.
All right, and everybody's got a voice. I was like, okay, that's
Some of the biggest auditions I've ever done. Well, most of the auditions, if there's background vocals, you grab them and then you go in, you just walk. Don't wait for them to ask you. Just walk up to the mic and sing. And then they'll go, oh, it's natural for him,
right.
I can remember this, like the Chris Cornell audition, where I had to, I learned the songs the night before the audition. We didn't find out about it until the day before, and it was 5 tunes.
So I presume they needed somebody to come in and nail it, right?
Yeah, and vocally, I can remember there was this one song off the Carry On album that I hadn't ever heard this song in my life, because the album hadn't come out yet, and we got sent this track, and it's got kind of a very sort of syncopated riff with a straight vocal.
Ooh.
So the vocal, it was like this riff against the vocal was completely opposite, and I was sitting there at 3 a.m, like working on this background vocal, like I was going to go in and sing the shit out of this background vocal, basically.
Yeah.
Like
right.
That was my, okay, there's a background vocal, I'm going to do it because that can make or break. So I can remember learning that. And I also remember like Don Henley, like asking me at my very first audition I did with him, like, so do you sing? And when a member of the Eagles, asks you if you can sing, you can have a lot of things go through your head, like,
there's another singing drummer.
Yeah, exactly. And vocals are a huge part of his music. So yeah, you better say you're going to sing, and you better sing, to the best of your ability. Yeah.
Some of those drummers I've seen that sing, I feel like they have an ability to have a much more musical sensitivity to the music. So I also remember thinking, even if I don't sing in a song, I want to know what the lyrics are or what it's about. Because if I want to get the feel of it, sure, you can use a metronome, what have you, but if you know your singer's breathing pattern and the way that they kind of enunciate and how their voice as an instrument perform, you can really find a way to settle in to where they're at with the groove. And that I've found so many times, it's like, it just feels like water flowing once I know how they like to sing it. Yeah.
You make a great point, because I find that sometimes drummers can be, any musician really, but sometimes drummers can be a little in their own world when it comes to stuff like that. And so that's so important, dude. I mean, like, thinking about I'll tell you, I've done a lot of gigs with foreign artists based in Japan and in France. And so that adds another level of complexity when the song's in a foreign language that you don't know,
it's about,
And so it's really neat to get the intention of the song, and at least like if it's not the direct translation, at least what he's, what the singer is singing about, what they're trying to convey. In that, it always would give me a whole new perspective on the song in a really cool way, where it's like, I can learn the parts and I can do that, but if it's just somebody singing, you don't understand the intention at all. Where are we, But like, I can remember, like, in Japan, Tsuyoshi Nagabuchi, artist that I play with over there, he had written a song, and it was about the tsunami in 2011 in Japan, and his kind of intention behind those lyrics and stuff like that. And once I learned, like, oh my God, like, that's really, like, a lot of people, like, just disappeared that day into the sea when that happened, and he was trying to convey, like, so I was like, oh my God, okay, I get it. And then I played completely different once I figured out. And it was a really cool moment too, because I can remember playing with him, and he speaks very broken English, and I speak a little bit of, just studying Japanese, so it's like, but once I understood, and we always had this great connection, he and I, with, he would, or like, I don't know, just playing with him, I would really try and be listening to his phrasing, and also learn some of the, like I say, the meaning behind the songs and stuff. And then I don't know, it's really cool. Like, that experience of playing with artists singing in other languages. 'Cause it's like, music is the universal language. I guess it sounds cliche and cheesy, but there's a universal thing to it where, you both connect, and I don't know, it's wonderful, even
Yeah,
if you,
it is. And
yeah.
I think that's what I would like to think when there's an artist that's been working with many musicians. I mean, so many guys get ringers when they're in the studio, but when
Mm.
they go on tour, they need someone that they can bunk with for 23 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's always important, but that's the, and I've noticed over time, when an artist, let's say they have gone through many backup bands, and it's not for any, negative reason. It's just the way that the industry goes or people's availability. But I
Yeah.
found it so fascinating when there was an unspoken musical connection. Like you
Mhm.
get each other, and it can even be generationally. Like there's no generation now, too. I
Yeah.
with somebody who they're older than my father, but we both have this just deep seated love for the Beatles.
Ah, cool.
So yeah, so as soon as we met, which brings me to another question I was going to ask you about auditioning. When I went in for the audition,
Yeah.
they asked me to learn like 3 songs, but I wanted this gig, so
Right.
I learned like 20 songs or something. And it was because in my mind I wasn't going to an audition; I was going to rehearsal number one. The goal was at the end of the rehearsal, they're going to say, "Oh, we could play a show tonight." And after,
Dude, that's exactly what I say. You
oh yeah,
nailed it. You just said, I always tell people, make them feel at the audition like we could walk out and play a gig right now, and it
yeah,
would be pretty good. That's
right.
the goal. If you can do that, you get the gig.
Yeah, and a
That's
lot of
great.
times it's I don't play very much classical music, but I'm a big fan of classical music, and I find that that's a particular art form where there's no ego in that. The whole goal is for people to ascend to a certain level of facility to make this music come to life that someone may have composed 200-300 years ago.
Sure.
It was impossible for them to have played all the instruments simultaneously. So it's everybody just has to, dedicate themselves to the written note and not have an ego. But well, I didn't write the solo. That's not really the whole thing. It's like you're
Right.
you're part of a bigger thing. And I think whenever I've auditioned, unless I know that they wanted something different, what they had going before is probably what they're used to. So I want to like solve a problem as soon as I can, but just by them not going, oh, that wasn't so hard, because they're
Dude, you're
comprised
saying all
really.
the things that I say. It's amazing. You're saying a lot of the things that I say, like be the problem solved. That's one of the things that I
Oh
tell
yeah, yeah. I think I may have heard you say that, and that's
people.
something similar to another drum teacher I had that would always be like, if of course, be prepared. That was like almost a given. You should be able to play. You should know their songs.
Yeah.
He said, but walk in remembering that they're just a person, and they just want to be comfortable. So the faster you're not talking about music, the faster you're going to be connecting. I was like, oh, that's like because I'd be nervous about the notes, and you go, no, 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 no. You did all the work. Now you just have to go in and just have fun with it, and then you might connect on a whole other level where you barely even play because in the professional mindset they go, well, obviously you're supposed to play. You didn't get here by accident. We heard you play, or we heard of
Yeah.
somebody to play with. But yeah, that's a really big thing. And I think another big thing that I wanted to ask you about with your auditioning, this is where I'm getting to, is you're pretty much a preparer, right? Like you prepare as much as possible, right?
Well,
Like,
it's like you said, that's almost the given that you have to
yeah,
do that. That's
okay,
a given. So you have to be, you've got to, get the material down. And now that's just a given. So now like,
yeah,
what do we do to seal this deal?
right, right.
Yeah.
Well, like, I guess what my question was, do you or have you had a general means of how the auditions that you've done have come to you? I mean, are they usually through someone you already knew or you worked with? I mean,
Usually.
usually, okay. And I
Yeah. I
asked
mean, there's
the
different,
industry. Oh, I'm sorry.
there's different ways that they come about, but generally it's not a open thing that is advertised somewhere.
Mhm.
It's generally through a friend or through a person that puts these sorts of things together that knows you.
Right. So, how would you go about recommending to anyone nowadays to try to network?
Oh man, I mean, well, during the pandemic, it's been really tough for folks. So it's like basically all people have been able to do is probably just work on their social media, which is really important because the first thing people do tend to look at now is your Instagram, or your
Right.
YouTube, your social media. They're going to want to look and see, and that's almost like in the last little while. I've actually gotten gigs basically based around a recommendation, somebody going and looking at the YouTube or whatever and going, oh, okay, we think this is the right guy. And then they call you and go, would you be interested in this tour? That's actually happened. So that's a thing now
Yeah.
that you kind of have to together. Now, beyond that, all it is really getting out and meeting people and doing every single little thing, you know, that you can, that when you're a younger musician, you know, and you've got the time and you don't have as much financial burden and stuff as you might have as you get older and stuff, it's easier and easier to go do things like that aren't, I don't recommend people do a lot of things for free, you know, but it's like, if somebody's like, hey, there's a jam, you know, come down and, you know, I can introduce you to this bass player friend of mine because they're really cool or whatever, go do it. Because it's like, you're going to meet people every time and then they're going to remember you, you know. Or if there's a session where it's like, you know, it's like a friend's, you know, pulling a favor, hey, can I get you to do this thing, you know, and go do it, you know. Go do every single little thing. I mean, I can remember being in LA at the beginning. I used a referral service at MI to get my first gig with the band. They sent me down and I did a little audition and stuff, and I got this gig, and that's a band I ended up doing a record with. Eventually we got signed over in Japan, Southeast Asia deal. Once I got out of that, which that lasted like 5 years. And then once I got out of that, I didn't know what to do next. So I literally, like, because I hadn't spent a lot of time networking, doing other things yet, getting to know other people. So I literally just started calling, like, out of the local papers and stuff, ads for musicians, or like going to open mics. Like, I didn't know what that, you know, it was like, and some of it was awful, but then some of it was cool. And yeah, it ended up being like, when I think back on those days and how I started getting better and better auditions and getting a network going, it was a drummer friend of mine that I did some cover gigs with that referred me to a guy that ended up being one of the dudes that kind of puts together auditions and touring bands in LA. You know, he got me into an audition, the drummer friend of mine. He got me into this audition. I didn't know any of this network or this guy, you know, so the drummer gets me into the audition, and I almost got the gig. I was like the runner up for the gig. So then the dude that was actually organizing the auditions, like, who's this guy? Who's this kid? Because I've never met him before, and he's a good guitar player. So I got on his radar through that. You know, through a drummer that I did cover gigs with.
Yeah,
so,
and people want to work with people that they like. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that's the other thing, is that then once you do start getting jobs, you know, then it's going to be like when a position opens up, you know, oh, we need a guitar player, we need, you know, then you refer people for it. And that, when I think about some of my friends, you know, my buddy John Button plays in the Who, and I can remember referring a friend of mine, Frank's a great guitar player and MD. He started working with Roger Daltrey many years ago. Cool. And he called me and said, hey, you know, we're going to need, you know, he was looking for a couple different musicians, and I referred John to him. I can remember, for bass. And John went down, did the audition, got the gig. So that was 2009. And then 2017 or 18, Pino Palladino couldn't do some Who gigs because he was playing with John Mayer, I think.
John Mayer, right?
Yeah, so they asked John. I mean, he was like in Roger's solo band already, so it's like he knew all the songs. It was like he was part of that family and stuff, and so he got the gig with the Who. So it's like that, you know, that was just a referral through a friend, through me, you know, to another guy that asked me. So you know, it's just like that. It's like any job, I guess. Really, I guess this probably happens in every industry, right?
I guess. I mean, I tried LinkedIn for a minute, and I kept seeing this has nothing to do with music. So. But I have all of the social media thing. I'm on them all, you know. And
well, building your thing. It's interesting. Like, social media is like, people will find you if you're out there and you're building it and it grows and it goes well. Social media, you'll get opportunities. You know, I mean, you guys contacted me. You know, SAS Creative Exchange contacted me because they see me through, you know. I guess part of it was a referral through a friend, but also you're going to have known me on social media, and then and that's just, you know, that's how it, every single little thing comes your way through, you know.
Yeah. So would you recommend, I mean, nowadays, I remember the days of being in New York, and you did just go to do the hang, and I had my little business card I made at the little machine, you know. But nowadays, do you feel that you almost just wait for the phone to call, the phone call to come, because you're already putting yourself out there, you know, people, you're not chasing or poaching a gig these days. It's more like they kind of come to you? Or
I let people know sometimes when I'm feeling like phone's not ringing. You know, one thing that can happen is if you go on tour, people think you're working or that you're always busy, and then you don't get calls. It's like sometimes you got to let people know, like, hey, I'm around and I'm looking. You know,
Okay. How do you do it? How do you recommend people do that? Say it.
honestly, it's like if you've gone to every single thing at the beginning, you know, and you've built a network and you've started, you know, you've gone and done cover gigs and occasional sessions and stuff, and then it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. If you get to that point, and then maybe you get, I find when I need to do that is like I say, like if I've got a touring gig already, but then like you get off the road and you're home and everybody like, there's a thing in LA about like if you want to play on sessions, I can imagine it's like this in Nashville, then you don't really go do too many tours because this is
You
something.
pick up the first time they call.
Yeah, like if you're not around, then you know you kind of have to stay in town if you want to be a session player, you know. And then when you go on tour, everybody thinks you've got a gig, and so you know you might get back and 3-4 months go by and everybody's you know they all think you're on the road. They're they play with so and so, but then you know so you don't get the call because they're like, oh, they've already got a gig or whatever. So you got to sometimes just put out the word like, hey, I'm around. I'm you know this tour's done or whatever, and I'm looking, you know. And so it's just really just calling your friends and the folks that you've networked with to
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, to kind of sew that up a little bit, let people know you're looking, you know.
That's
Um,
good to hear. I mean, I'm in one of those situations now. I'd had a band that we're starting to pick up all our tour dates from last year.
yeah.
And well, unfortunately, the lead person in the band actually passed away last week.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry, man. Wow.
oh, thank you. It was,
Wow.
I, I've always felt, when you play with a person and then they pass away suddenly and you were in their band, you have a special connection that fans don't necessarily have. And
Sure.
so the times that that's happened, because I've had other, singers over the last years, that's part of life. It's a very small niche of people who know what that's like when you've
Yeah.
kind of backed up that person kind of on the front lines of the battle,
Yeah.
but you're friends, but you're really workmates, and then all of a sudden they're gone, and you just go, "Oh man, I don't want to be insensitive," but there also goes the gig. The gig is gone, and
Well,
there's
it's a lot of things you're
warning.
processing,
Mhm.
you know, in those moments, I think. You know, I mean, you think about for sure, like when let's say when Michael Jackson passed away, right? I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
like they were gearing up to do this huge tour, and I know some people that were working in that camp, and it's like you know you're getting ready to do you're dealing with first of all you know the loss of somebody that you know a lot of people knew personally and you know friends with and whatnot, and then you're also dealing with the fact that you know like you know a lot of people in that orbit you know they've got families and they're relying on you know this is a little bit of what I was talking about at the beginning of about not tying your you know because every gig ends and for some for horrible reasons like somebody passes away and then the band just dissolves
Right.
and that's why you have to keep you know it's really good to keep your value as a musician and just as a person and stuff like that not too tied to an organization
Mhm.
because you know that these are some of the things that can happen you know I mean it's got to be like I've never been in an original band that's lost a member. Like I think about, you know, what about the guys in Soundgarden when Chris passed away? I played with Chris, obviously, and I was in his, you know, but you know, those guys were in the middle of a tour
Yeah.
that night, you know, and or what about you know, Chester and Lincoln Park, you know, like
Mhm.
when you've been a band for a long time in a creative entity, and then that all of a sudden just, you know, uh there's all kinds of things that you know from I mean it's just awful you know like on so
Yeah.
many levels on a personal emotional level everything and then also just you're like what just happened to your career you know
Right.
and so there's all those things that you have to process and get through so
Yeah.
think about those guys like you know what that's like you know like for
Right.
I
Right.
mean God man like somebody like Kim Thale like for him like it's great to see he's been out like playing with Wayne Kramer and doing different things and stuff because I know like for a long time he was kind of musically somewhat dormant I think he just sort of like you know he wasn't like actively out there I remember meeting him in 2009 he came to a Chris Cornell show and
Wow.
he was so sweet you know and we stood like on the side of the stage and watched Chris for a bit while he was playing acoustic and Chris he was playing Fell on Black Days and Kim was watching the crowd and they're all singing every word. And he was kind of like, I don't know if this is what he felt, but it seemed to me like he was just like kind of blown away that the audience's response to hearing this song. He's like, wow, Fell on Black Days. Like people are still totally into this. And they're like, it was like he was seeing it was like he was getting a little fire lit or something.
Wow. From it all.
Yeah, like just kind of, and so it was amazing to see him like, and then of course they got back together and they went out and started working. He was always, I saw him a couple of times after that, and he was always very, very nice to me, and he remembered me and remembered my name, and I just, he struck me as I don't know, I don't know him, but he struck me as the few times I met him as a really, really genuine and stuff. So then I think about also he spoke really beautifully at Chris's service when he passed away. I was a little on the edge of my seat because when he got up, he was a little halting in his voice, and I was like, is he gonna be okay? Can he get through this? And then he just started letting it flow, and the things he said were he talked about how Chris didn't discriminate. He treated everybody well, which is true. I believe that is true, and that he was very like he was all heart, and didn't matter who you were. He treated people with respect, and he said he didn't even discriminate between species. And I was like, what does that mean? He said some of his best friends were dogs, and he told this story about a stray in the neighborhood where Chris lived in Seattle, and the stray would come around. He would feed him and take care of him. And I think he named him like Bill or something. So this dog it was like a stray dog named Bill or something. It was Bill or Bob or something. I can't remember. And people, can be like, so what are you doing this weekend? And he's like, oh, me and Bill are going to go camping, and like he'd take the dog and go camping and feed him out in the, woods and stuff. They go like, and stuff like that, where he's just like, he just didn't, it was so cool, That
is cool.
So anyways, every interaction I had with Kim was he just seemed like he's got a lot of heart. And then like, I just think about like we're all dealing with that, but what that was like for him mid-tour to then have Chris, pass away, and just sort of like whatever he was going through. I don't know, like thinking about how hard that would be, like to be, you're in Detroit and it's like you just played a show and stuff, and then like the world just stops, Yeah,
I can't imagine. I mean, I guess I can kind of imagine because we had just been working on new material,
right,
as close to a few days ago.
Oh man, yeah.
It's just a sad thing.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, God, it's like.
Yet I feel really fortunate to have gotten to play. I was with this band for the last 3 years. I was the last drummer of this long laundry list of musicians we've had in this band.
Yeah.
And I actually got to meet some of the older band members at the funeral, and it was just interesting to see how when someone, I guess, is so full of energy and so full of life, I guess it's hard to not take it for granted that when they're gone, it's like, wow, they burnt really bright, and they lit up a room, and yet when they're gone, it's like, wait, that can't be it. They can't already be gone. It's such a
yeah. I mean, like, I've had a lot of loss over the years, family members and and then folks that I've worked with and stuff, and everyone just kind of like, you get older and things just start getting real. I mean, it's like,
sure,
it sort of changes your perspective on what's important, and how it's a and how to just appreciate and be present in the moment when you are making music, I guess, with these people, because you never know, like every tour could be the last tour you do, or gig could be the last gig you do, so you treat it like that and just really appreciate, because I guess we're just not like programmed to think that way, like from the get-go, and then you learn through loss and just it's staring you in the face, like, okay, like, and then it changes your perspective as you get older, I guess, but it's
I watched your interview with Steve Vai and one of the most like moving parts about what he said, because he seems like such a genuine, humble person, and an amazing, dedicated artist, of course, but he seemed like he had a pretty much almost like a philosophy, like, if you just keep doing what you love doing, you're pour yourself into that, then the people and the gigs that like you almost kind of are meant to be part of, they kind of come to you. If you chase them though, they don't work. And that really moved me because I thought, man, like I have dream gigs. I was going to ask you like, what would be the dream gig? Do you think, if David Lee Roth called tomorrow, you'd be ready to nail that gig, man, but I think it's also like, if you try to kind of force it, it doesn't happen organically. And if you just keep trying to fixate on like what you love doing, like really, be passionate, then those other things will come. They'll feel so much more organic. But that's a tricky
Yeah.
thing to do. It's a tricky way to think about it. That you have to
You mentioned Steve. I saw him 48 hours after Chris passed away. It was like just a couple days after, and I saw Steve and actually got to sit and speak with him for a few minutes. So it's interesting you bring him up in that context. But he was at the Malibu Guitar Festival, and there was a friend of mine that convinced me to go out and hang out that night, and I didn't really feel like getting out. It just was so, like my brain was, my mind was just. But I thought, okay, I'm going to go. So I went, and then this friend of mine said, "Hey, I want you to, talk to Steve for a second. He wants to talk to you, And Steve was sitting in a little like cordoned off area off to the side, and it was kind of loud in there, I remember. So it was like a booth off to the side of the stage, and he took me over, and I sat down, and he said, "Hey, I know you played with Chris, and I just wanted to see how you're doing," and he started to say some things that were in that Steve Vai way that was just so profound,
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. He took a couple minutes to just say like, "Hey, like one of the things he said was, you can still have a relationship, that hasn't gone away, like you still, your memories and your, like," and he said it in a way that was so much more eloquent than I can say. Can't remember his exact words, but it was the intention was that it doesn't have to be all dark. Like, and I know he said, "I know it's too early now to think about it that way."
Yeah.
And this is something that you hear, like for instance, I've heard Joe Biden say a number of times, who knows loss, because of course he had a terrible accident with his wife and daughter dying, when he was really young. And so when like all politics aside and whatever you think about people, when they're speaking about loss and death, that you listen when somebody's been through something like that, and he said essentially what Steve said, which is, it's, Joe says something like, the time will come where when you think of them, a smile will come to your face before a tear comes to your eye, I think is the quote, something like that. And Steve said, you're going to hit that point with where you'll think about him. And he said, when you're ready, try and go to that place, like that, like think about the happy memories and the good things about them. And you'll smile when you think about it before and so anyways, that was something that he said to me. So
that's really amazing.
It really resonated, man. And so Steve, and then I got to do that interview with him, and he was so cool. And some of the things he said, he did. You're right. He said, I knew that things were going to come my way. Like I just knew, like the universe was, like the gig with David Lee Roth, or he got the call for the Crossroads movie. That was after the Attitude song came out, and he said, I just knew if I, and it wasn't coming from a place of ego. It was coming from
no. It took me aback a second until I told my friend about it, and they said, "Oh, by the way, he's also Steve Vai, one of the most incredible players, undeniably." So he had the ability to back it up. But it's almost amazing when I listened to him. It was like he was talking about someone else, like, because he was so egoless about it.
Yeah.
And I just took so much of that to heart. It was so inspiring. Because I really think he was saying, the universe owes me that gig, or that's mine. It was more like, when I think the opportunity came, he felt prepared, because he'd almost like, you have to believe in yourself and believe that you can get that gig. Otherwise, you can't get it. But if it comes and you go, you know what? As great as this is, I felt in my heart I could do this. And so that's what I'm going to run with it,
Yeah, that is really the crux of it right there. Like, you have to believe. I can remember when I was a kid, like when I would listen to music, I would always like imagine myself being on stage, like playing those songs, like my fantasy of like whatever. And it was like,
oh man, that's so cool.
I sort of like visualized it, like when I was like 10, 11, 12, 13, I would just like, I'd listen to a song and think about performing it, you
Right.
know, and it was like,
I've been in Led Zeppelin and Nirvana a million times. Dreams, you know.
yeah, you have to do that because then you're ready. You're right. And it's like you just believe you can do it. I mean, my simple sort of 14-year-old, you know, like overly simplistic, naive self, but maybe it was pure thought was like, well, there's that guy on TV doing it. And at some point, like maybe he's not going to be doing that gig. So why can't I do it? Like, you know,
Yeah.
like,
No, that,
like, you know, I just have to be the best person in the room for the gig. So I just have to work towards that and then I'll do it. You know, it's,
yeah, that makes sense. I was 13 when I first saw Nirvana on TV, and there's one shot in the Lithium video in slow motion when Grohl spits water over the drums.
mm,
I remember thinking, "That's it." And then I like got back to it, like, oh, I don't know, I don't have anyone in my family that plays music. I don't really know if I can learn it. And then I started to like just investigate. Anyway, I come to hear that he was like the sixth or seventh drummer. I went, oh, good. Then you know, it's like that scene in Dumb and Dumber where he's like, "Do I have like a shot?" She's like, "Maybe one in a million." And he's like, "I still got a shot."
yeah, there's a chance.
Like that's all you need sometimes. You just need that little bit of chance.
That is a good scene. Yeah, I know. I love that scene too, where it's like, as long as you know you're not like, it's like glass half full, glass half empty, like, you know, stuff. It really is like so much of this stuff is about your attitude.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself? I mean, when you were doing the Chris gig? Were you mostly doing the Kim parts, like the solos and those parts? Did you get a
Oh,
chance to reach out to Kim and ask him? I'm just curious what that was like. You know,
I never actually talked to Kim about that stuff, but I would ask Chris. Chris actually played a lot of the rhythm guitar, so the solos were open to interpretation. You know, and I did some of the solos like Slaves and Bulldozers. I did, you know, some of the other Soundgarden songs. And then Yogi was really good actually in the Soundgarden context of doing the Kim sort of solos, because the wild sort of improvisational, like I don't think Kim probably ever played the same solo twice, you know.
oh, it's
He
very modal and feedback, beautiful style. But yeah, totally.
Yeah, and Yogi was really good at that. Like he kind of came up with a blues Hendrix background and a little bit more, whereas I was a little more like, especially back then. I came a long way actually since the Chris Cornell gig. I feel like in improv, but
Wow, cool.
so I drifted a little. I did some of the Soundgarden ones, and I did a lot of the Tom Morello parts. If we would play Audio Slave, and you know, but
Oh, okay.
Yogi did like Say Hello to Heaven, and did you know, like any of that kind of like a little more sort of blues based improv, where he would throw a lot of his own stuff in, you know, and that seemed to work well. One of the things in the Chris Cornell band that was cool was we did have two guitar players, and we were different. You know, he had a simpler rig with a fuzz and a wah and you know, like a simpler kind of setup, and I had much more technical stuff going on my side of the stage, so I could cover a lot of the, you know, in like the Audio Slave, like Gasoline, or
Yeah.
you know, the whammy on like a Stone, or those types of things. I had a lot of that stuff going on in the Sonics, whereas Yogi was a bit more of the raw improv element. So having two guitar players that with the different styles actually worked really well.
Wow.
Yeah, in that band.
Yeah, that sounds like you can cover all the bases. Which leads me to a question. You know, I can appreciate if there's not a simple answer,
Hmm.
but why wasn't Chris playing guitar?
I never knew that.
No,
I saw it sometimes,
was
like,
career to sing or
you know, I think he really enjoyed, um, to some degree, live for him playing guitar was difficult. Like not like difficult, like he could do it, but I think he really enjoyed the freedom of just being able to concentrate on singing when it's certainly when we did the solo band.
yeah. Because
Um,
I could totally appreciate that from a standpoint of like he's not playing two chord songs, he's playing Rusty Cage and singing. It's such independence and they're both really challenging. So yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of what I figured was, you know, you just wanted the freedom of saying, no, you know, I know
yeah.
what parts are like, but I have someone who can cover this. It'll
And
be
he would always do a solo bit in the middle of the set, five
yeah,
tunes, maybe on acoustic, you know, and that was his guitar outlet. I would ask him sometimes, you know, I would reference to him for like, he taught me directly how to play, like Suicide. He taught me directly how to play like a few other songs where he showed me the tuning and then showed me how, like, he knew. I've got video of him teaching me a lot of these things where I would take videos so that I could learn the parts, because it was so, it was easier because some of the tunings in Soundgarden were so odd, and there wasn't as much information online even 10 years ago or 11 years ago on the exact tune, because nowadays you can figure out just about anything on YouTube, but it was like back then, sometimes I'd be like, how the hell is this happening? And he would show me, I'd be like, oh, okay. And it would be like really, like, some of the tunings are radical, where it was like literally you had to change string gauges because the tunings would be so weird that there'd be 2 B strings or something, and different things like that. So it was easier sometimes to just ask him like what was going on, and then it would all fall under the fingers really easily. But I'll tell you a story I've never told anybody before.
Okay, thank you.
I'll give you like a scoop that that I still don't believe even happened. It feels like a dream, but
wow, cool.
Just to give you some insight into that. But there was one day around 2012 or 13, I guess, when I remember it was like mid-afternoon, the phone rang and it was Chris. And he called me and he goes, hey, like, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm good. And I was just driving in the car and stuff. It was like, good to hear from you. I hadn't talked to him for a while. And he was like, so what are you doing like later on, like in the, I don't know, it was like in the fall or something like that. What's going on? And I was like thinking, oh, cool, he wants to do some gigs or something, And I was like, man, I'm around, like, I've got some gigs. I was playing with Melissa Etheridge at the time, I remember. And so I was like, yeah, I've got some gigs, but I've got, of course, like, what do you got going on? Like, you thinking about going out? And he's like, well, yeah, like, I was wondering if you'd be interested in, possibly doing some touring. And I was like, dude, absolutely, so we're going to go do some solo stuff. And he goes, no, I'm talking about Soundgarden. And I was like, what? And I just didn't understand. It didn't compute, and then he started to explain. He said, well, this was before King Animal came out. And he said, we made this record and a lot of it is really like complex for me, like playing wise. It's difficult to play and sing at the same time. And he said, I'm just struggling with it a little bit, like where I don't know, like if this is what I want to do. Like I want to be able to sing, go out and really, because he played a lot of the rhythm guitars and Super Unknown, especially by that point, like by Super Unknown and Down on the Upside. He was I think a lion's share of the rhythm guitar parts were actually Chris, and he would write them, play them, and they were really intricate and cool. A lot of the stuff on Higher Truth was really intricate and cool, but and it was coming from him and his weird tunings and stuff that he would do. So it's a lot. I mean, I remember touring with him 2007, 8, and 9. The parts were like, I had to have, I had a rack of guitars. Like I had like 13, 14 guitars on tour sometimes because all the tunings and having to have spares. And so it's a challenge playing that music and having all the right guitars and just being in tune and all that. So I think he was struggling with that a little bit. And he just said, I haven't really talked to anyone else about it, but I did talk to Matt about it, Matt Cameron, and he said, I didn't bring up any names or anything, but he just said, I think maybe having somebody else come out to play would just be like, a really cool thing, and it could free up some,
right.
And he said, I mentioned to Matt that I'm thinking just like, man, I'm having a hard time with this. And before I even said like, he was saying this, he said, before I even said like, the idea about maybe getting somebody, Matt said, well, why don't we get somebody to come out and just help us out, and so he said, I know he's probably on board and okay with it. And I said, I haven't talked to anybody else, and so instantly I'm thinking in my mind, like, okay, Soundgarden is such a legendary band. There's those 4 dudes, and it's like, what's that going to be like? And I just said, look, in any capacity, I said, man, I will be there for you. I said, if you want me to come out and play 3 songs, I would be there for you, or whatever you want me to do. Cool. Just a chance to go do that with you, with that group, would be unbelievable. I just, whatever you want, if I said, I'm so down and so into it. And I don't know if he ever, okay. So that happened, and he started talking more about it, and he said, yeah, man, we could do like all this different stuff, like where, like he just said, I just think the doors would open, like where we could be able to do things that we've never been able to do before on tour. And he said, like, I just know the guys will dig you and that it would continue. And I didn't know what that meant. It would, hey, he said, he said, I just know that it would be cool and that it would continue. And I didn't know what that meant. Like whether he just meant like that we would continue touring, or whether he meant maybe we could work together, like more like, I was like, what does that even mean? So I was just like, dude, and he said, I don't want to do an audition. I don't want to ask other people. I don't want to, he said, if we're going to do it, he said, it'll either be you or I'm just going to learn the parts and do it. And not, and I was just so like, to think about that now, it's just like, I just said, whatever you need, I'm here for you. And I want to do it. And I'm so down with doing it. And just let me know. So I got off the phone. And the first thing I did when I put the phone down was told myself to not allow myself to go down that road and think about that possibility at all until it was presented. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, you're going to, because I was like, it's probably not going to happen. So just don't. You don't hurt yourself.
You don't want to get bummed out.
But I don't want to get bummed out. So I'm just it's out there and it happened. And it's like, let's see what happens. So we had one more conversation about it. 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, he said, we're going to go out and do some promo, which was like they were doing Letterman, I remember, for and a couple of TV shows. And he said, I think it would be better, to just go out and do these things, like, as and then we'll revisit it after that, because just because it's the first time people are seeing the band, like, since like they've done the blues and stuff.
Yeah, right.
So in image wise and stuff like that, it should be like basically saying if this would happen, it would be down like more towards when we're getting into general touring for the album. I was like, great, man, I'm totally down, like, into it.
Yeah,
whatever happens. We never talked about it again after that. It never came up ever again. So what happened was he got into rehearsal, and he just did it, and then it came under his fingers, and then they just went and did it, and I don't know if it was something that he ever brought up to Ben or Kim or any of those guys, or it was ever presented beyond just that initial conversation, but he did float it, and I did, like, I was just like, holy shit,
I mean,
so
just even hearing that and the gravity of that conversation, I gotta say, congratulations, and you picked the right guy.
Well,
by accident, you can take it to the bank in a way,
Just the thought that he thought about it, and then I love the guy so much, and it was like we did end up getting to do some more work together later on.
Right. I was gonna ask, you guys did play some more,
yeah, which was great, but we never talked about that ever again, which was just kind of how I approached things with him. It was like he was an artist and he had a lot of ideas and he floated a lot of things, and it was like and then many things wouldn't happen and other things would, and that was one of those things that he brought up, and then it was an idea. This is what artistic people do, I guess. But anyway, I've never told anybody that story before, like, not publicly.
Wow. But thank you for that, and I realized too that I think the lesson is just retaining that humility, that's so inspiring to hear, because it'd be really hard not to tell everybody, hey, guess what I'm going to do. But
I just couldn't, it'd be painful on myself. And then also I was also aware, like, that there would be it would be weird for a minute, even for me. I would be worried about, because it's a band and I'm aware of band chemistry.
Yeah.
Like, to not affect that, even in a live capacity. Sometimes, when bands bring out other players and you're like, wait a minute, that guy's not in the band, and you see them, and it's like, so to be aware of that stuff, like, I think about, like, Wolfgang Van Halen, who's got, this great music coming out and stuff, and he's embarking on his own career, but he took, like, so much heat for a young guy, like, playing in Van Halen. And I think he told the story recently after his dad passed away about how they were even planning on doing this, what they called the kitchen sink tour, where everybody would come out, and he floated the idea of, hey, hear me out, like, what if Mike comes out and does it, and I can come out and play a few songs and, like, open maybe or something. Right. And, and he got his dad into that idea. I think he was all about the legacy of Van Halen, and he had a great respect for his dad and his uncle and what they did and everything. And he still took so much heat from the fans about him being there instead of Mike over those years. And it's just like, hey, it's like, it could be, and on one hand I get it, and I think he gets it. It's like they're a band they're like superheroes, right?
Superheroes, yeah.
Like, it's that unit of, like, the whatever, like that. It's like a band of it's an entity that people see as one thing. So when something changes, it can be so difficult. So anyways, I was very aware of that aspect of it, as well as just not buying into like, don't go down that road mentally, because it probably isn't going to happen, you know. But it's one of those things that you don't want to. That's something I really recommend to people. Like, until you're up there on stage at the first gig, if you've scored a gig with a band, like, until you're up there on stage and you're halfway through the first song, you can, at that point, you can be like, well, I think this is actually happening. I think we're here, you know, because at least you're gonna have that one gig under your belt, you know. But until that moment, it's best.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you get nervous before you play a gig, or do you have a ritual before you get on? Do you tell yourself, "Hey, I got this gig now. I know I'm about to get on the stage." Does that play a role?
I do get nervous. I totally get nervous. And yeah, every gig pretty much I get nervous, just because like it's more like you get up there on stage and you're like, I want to make sure everything's okay, like my amp's working and like the guitar's not totally out of tune and I don't, you know, fall flat on my face, or I don't forget how to play the bridge, or all those things that can go through your. But then it's kind of like you said earlier when you were talking about auditioning, and then your friend was like, no, like you practiced, you learned the notes, now you got to just connect. You know, you put all that stuff as best you can to the side, and then if you've done the work and done the preparation, I don't know about you, but I have really bad dreams, like I didn't learn the songs and the gig is now, and like why didn't I work on the music, and then I'm plagued by dreams like that. Or
I have dreams like that. I told my wife that like 2 weeks ago. She's like, "What happened?" I woke up all frazzled. Like, I couldn't find my chart folder, and she's like, "What?" I was like, I had this dream, because it happened once. I was supposed to do a rehearsal for a show, and we were going to get back in the hotel room, and I brought, because I learned a lesson: never make the same color folders. I took the wrong one, so it was missing like one paper and the other. So I had to run about. You ever been to Disney World, Epcot Center?
Once.
Okay, well,
God,
if you've ever been, you know it's a big round circle.
Okay.
We were playing in the theater, which is halfway around. And so I had to run from one of the hotels. It was easily 3 miles, I think. I mean, I was going to be early anyway. I had the time, but in my mind, I was like, "Oh man, I got to get this. I got to be prepared. We got this big thing." And so when I got back, I was in such like that as soon as I sat down, I went, "Well, they're not getting anyone else today." I got the gig today. And yeah, I've sometimes I go back to the first time I played with that band, and my friend in the band goes, "By the way, you know you're the sub, and you know you're prepared to do." I mean, it's the first time I did a real gig. At the sound check, they go, "What would you like in your monitor?" I said, "I don't know. What's a monitor?" You know, I didn't know yet. Sure. I've been prepared not only by, thankfully, my teacher showed me the things that, you know, the subbing situation, but it's Davy Jones from the Monkees. Yeah. I met him when I was studying with his drummer at the drum school, the collective in the city. And he met me when I was 19, and we just kind of hit it off for a minute. And what's amazing is he gave me a shot as a sub because he saw, I don't know, maybe this like kindred thing, like somebody gave him a shot in theater when he was really young. And that's kind of like just all of my career just built off of that experience. But I remember thinking after the first gig, "Oh man, I got a second one in a week. I hope that I do better the second time, because now I have one under my belt." Right. I remember before we got on stage, now I felt nervous because the last one I almost didn't. I wasn't present enough. It went by so quickly, and I still look at the video and go, "Oh man, I can't believe I don't remember half of it because I was in such excitement."
Dude, I remember I remember doing a gig with Government Mule. I got to play a whole set with them.
Oh wow!
It was New Year's 2009, I think. They asked me to. They always do a New York.
I think 2008. I was at Government Mule 2008.
Oh, 2008.
Yeah, they do it every year. You were there the next year. That's cool.
Oh, so you did? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, it was the next year. That's right. Yeah, and I remember the experience because those guys are like master jammers.
Oh yeah, right? One chord. They'll jam on the one for days. It's awesome.
Or like learn a song by an artist that day and like go out and do a really cool version of it. Like, you know, or tackle like a whole like side of a record and go out and do like with not a hell of a lot of rehearsal. And they're just like masters because they're great musicians, and you know, Warren is unbelievable. And so anyways, I flew to New York to do, they wanted to do a whole set of Seattle music, and they asked me to do it.
Nice.
And so we did songs by Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog, and Nirvana, and and Pearl Jam, and it was like 11 or 12 tunes. And I can remember flying in 2 days before the gig, and we did a rehearsal. I went straight to SIR, I think, and went down there, and we played through the music, and it was kind of pretty loose. It was like, I was like, wow, like, and not, it was like, because they were just getting familiar with it, and that's kind of how they roll. Like, they might give it a couple listens, kind of get the changes, and and it was like, I remember playing through it and feeling like my anal retentive self feeling like, it's not like quite, we're not quite there, was what I was thinking, like, and Jürgen, who's a good friend of mine, who's played bass in the band for many years now. He's like one of my best friends. So he came up to me and he goes, I know what you're thinking. He's like, don't worry about it. It's going to be amazing. Like, it's going to be great. Like, the gig. I was like, okay. And then, and so we did the show, and it was great. And like, like Warren was amazing. Like, he's amazing. He's just like, in rehearsal, they're just kind of like, getting through the, like, they're figuring out they're not about like tight. They're about like figuring out the parameters to play with. Like, they're he comes from that Allman Brothers. Like, he's a brilliant, jammer. And, I also remember hearing a quote from him: mistakes are opportunities, see where it's going to go, and just embrace it. And like, that whole thing about maybe it's like the whole, if you hit a note and it's a wrong note, hit it twice and people think you meant it, or let's see where that goes, now. So
make a mistake, it's jazz the second time.
Yeah. So we did it, and there was some great sort of, interesting moments, like jamming and just see where it's going to go. But the feeling that you described when you were talking about the first gig that you played with that band was this feeling that I had when we got off stage and we got through it. And then I was thinking about it later that night, like probably before I went to sleep. I was like, did we do that? Like, how did we do that? Like, I think the show happened, like, and it was so much fun, and like, just so, but it just kind of goes through you, and then it's done. The time goes by, and it was like, it was great,
Right.
And I learned a lot from that. I think too, just like, that was one of those experiences where it's like, because once again, I come from that Canadian, where you learn your stuff and you've got the tones and you got all the parts, and that served me well through my sideman career. But there's also other aspects to music, like the just roll with it,
Right.
sort of that. And so to get into, to allow me to come into that world for a minute and see how they did things, that was a real cool experience.
That is really cool. Yeah, I've had a similar thing, like probably about close to 12 years now, when I got kind of a big tour. It was a reunion tour with the Monkees, which I've been playing with Jones for 11 years. I was kind of waiting for the opportunity, and then knowing, well, even if it happens, it's one of those situations where like they might get together and use the other guy's backup band, or,
Right.
like, one of us isn't working this year. It's musical chairs.
Right.
One of us isn't working this summer. But thankfully, Davey got, his backup band to back up the group, and then the other guys brought in a couple of people. And I just remember having lunch with him one day, and he asked me two things. He's like, "So what do you think? We're gonna be adding they want to add all these songs from these shows." He's like, "But we did them different ways in different decades." He's like, "What do you think is going to be the easiest path, the path of least resistance?" Because I think on the one hand, he wanted to know what we were capable of doing, and what the expectations were. Because he would say he wasn't much of a musician. He was a real true performer, that's for sure. But he didn't want to think about the ins and outs of like, oh, well, what key are we going to play it in? Are we going to, he didn't really want to necessarily invest into that. So he was kind of just asking, what do you think? And I said, well, truth be told, this is not going to be like, maybe who knows how many times you guys are going to get to do this, being it's the 45th anniversary, in terms of like, when would be a better opportunity than to just not do the 80s version or the 90s version or the 70s? Why don't you just do what if as a band we did the original versions, just like the record, like as though we were a classical, band, not tribute act, but what would it be like the Fab Four?
Right.
There's a couple of those guys, and their whole thing is, we play that music as it was composed.
Sure.
Even the Beatles never played some of that stuff live, but they view the record as a composition that they're, honoring. And so I just kind of presented that, like, what if we did that so that it doesn't really matter necessarily who's in the band, because we're just going right off the record. It was kind of, it was almost kind of half joking. Wouldn't that just be the obvious, easy way? And I was also secretly thinking, those parts are so good. That was the Wrecking Crew. That is some of the greatest musicianship hidden under a pocket of pop cleanliness that the things they got away with, brilliant. And so I was hoping he'd be kind of hip to that. He goes, yeah, I have been listening to the records, and I don't know why we kept changing stuff. He's like, I think the fans don't need us to change. He's like, we're going to be doing this big video thing. And he goes, so what do you think we should wear? Because we use sometimes it'd be, oh, I love the black shirts, man. And then next time one guy would wear a green shirt. Hey, man, we should all be wearing colors now. So 6 months, then no white shirts this tour. And then halfway through the tour, white shirts by tomorrow. Oh, So I never knew quite what was going to happen. But he's asking me, I went, oh, we wear suits. It's like, really? You'd wear a suit and play drums? I went, yeah. Buddy Rich and all my heroes wore suits. They looked awesome.
That's great.
And when people still ask, because I played in a suit with his other band recently too, like, you want to play drums in a suit? There's nothing I'd rather do in a suit than play music. So I get kind of a kick out of that. I'm doing this insane thing, but until you see me doing it, I look like I'm a respectable person. Instead of, I usually think I'm one step away from a criminal on paper. So I get away with this stuff. I got hair long and my tattoos and stuff, and I just love that whole vibe. And he goes, yeah. You guys would do that like an orchestra? I went, yeah, I think so. So we wore suits every night.
It's kind of isn't it kind of freeing? Because you know what you don't think about it. You go, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just like you were saying about the parts, like if you did one guitar part or the other guy did it, it's almost like you knew your role. And
right.
You honored the music. It wasn't an ego thing. If anything, the whole reason why you're there is because you were able to recreate it and honor it. And yet it's going to be authentic in that it's not a copy. You're not, what I'm saying? You're not, it's like it's like doing a character in a remake of a movie. You're honoring the character, like Heath Ledger, the Joker.
Yeah.
He's not doing someone else's Joker, but he's still honoring the source material. So I think it's about the source material. So anyway, I have this binder with about 80 songs, charted every note, all the percussion, everything. And we ended up playing about half of it. But ever since then, I went, why don't I just chart every note when I can? And I've been doing that pretty religiously with any gig because I'm not much of a sight reader. I never, you put a jazz chart in front of me, I'd rather hear the melody. But when I have a literal chart, especially ones I write, it's kind of like the process of listening and writing it down almost gets it ingrained. And then
That's interesting.
Because
I generally don't write things down, but I could see how, like, I'm not a reader, but I'm okay at charts, I guess. I mean, not great, but I'm not a reader, but I could see how that would work. Like just the process of actually committing it to and doing that will help you to refine your knowledge of the piece. And that makes total sense to me. Yeah.
And now that I have all these folders, if I get called on a gig, I did the record and now we're going to play a year later, I just grab the book and read it. I'm like, oh, good.
Well,
I wrote it down.
There you go. Yeah, that's helpful because it's like I got to go back.
Yeah, but you have to commit, I think, to that. It was kind of where I saw the lineage of what you're saying. If you don't commit fully, like, no, I'm going to write every note. I'm going to figure out what that fill was. Then you're not really giving it every bit of attention that it deserves.
Yeah, I love doing that. I mean, like, I'm a Van Halen geek, and I love learning things note for note, phrasing, like really getting inside what happened. And it's kind of like a hobby almost, because you don't necessarily have to do that for every gig, but it's the hobby aspect of getting inside what that person was doing, even if it's not, because then it sort of becomes part of your thing too. Like, and so it's informing your style. And then hopefully you can just turn it around and do your own thing with it. Doesn't sound like that other person, maybe necessarily, unless you want it to. It's for me being able to do it. Like Van Halen is probably, absolutely one of my primary influences, and being able to try and get that sound wise, as well as like the timbre, the way the notes ring, the rhythm, like every single phrasing aspect to try and get there is really fun for me. I don't know why, but it is. It's just like
probably 15-year-old you is going, I can do it.
Yeah, like to get there and go, oh, it's like a puzzle. Like you figured it out. I learned Spanish fly a while ago, and like,
cool.
I could never do it. I could never do the middle part, the fast picking part in the middle. That's kind of like it was like, what's going on? And now I can kind of do it. Like I got this point where it's like I figured out the phrasing, and like it's like there it is. I see what he's doing now. I totally see. Where there's like another lick in somebody get me a doctor. And I've been a big Van Halen 2 kick recently. And like, it's this lick that like I used to play a certain way and I thought I knew it. And then I went and slowed it down and listened to it again. And I go like, wait a minute, you're not playing it right. Like, and I went and listened and it goes by so fast, but it's like,
yeah,
this is what he's doing. Oh God. Like, you know, like still, and it still feels really fun for me, like to find those things.
Yeah. You're discovering that little nugget of like gem of creativity.
And weird, you know, because Eddie's such a unique, like, what is it that makes him so special? Like, why did he connect so hard? And, you know, if you really get into, if you don't phone it in on any aspect, it's like you touch this little bit of magic that this guy that was like 22 years old or whatever, just like, you know, genius son, they're like, what is it that he was doing? There it is. Oh, you know, and then you can find it and then go, oh, this is what made it so different and special and not necessarily even difficult, just like, I never would have thought of doing it that way. And then when you get it, you're like, and then it can sort of maybe help to inform your own thing. Like touch a little bit of that genius for a second, you know?
Well, I mean, one of the things I've enjoyed when Eddie passed away, there was so much available, you know, videos that people were posting I'd never seen, or, you know, when I went down that rabbit hole and I kept thinking one really important thing. He's always smiling when he plays.
Yeah.
Full of life. So even when it was like the most difficult thing, he made it look easy, not because he was just obviously like an amazing technical ability, but it's like he was allowing himself to have fun while he did it. It wasn't,
dude, such a big part.
Right?
And so there's also a lot of like the spirit and a lot of like the physical aspect in the playing is so important. You remember when Neil Peart went and studied with
Freddie Gruber?
Yeah, with Freddie Gruber.
Yeah.
And he talks about what I didn't really, because I knew when he came back and he started, you know, performing afterwards and stuff, he was playing traditional grip and stuff, and he changed his thing up a little bit. But the main thing that I got after rewatching, I think it was the Rush documentary, I didn't understand initially, like sort of the main thing he'd taken away, but Freddie taught him about the dance, how it's a dance, like, and it's what you're doing in between the notes.
Right.
Like that, you know, so like with your body, like and he said, we'd get up and move around. And like, you know, as opposed, because Neil was always like, you know, very serious and like amazing, but like very serious. And then Freddie taught him to like, you know, and it was like, and Eddie has that in his guitar playing with this, the smile. And also just in the, you know, he has so much sauce in his playing, like in the phrasing and stuff, and the rhythm was impeccable, but it's like, there's also this like loose kind of thing. And if you don't put that energy and intention into it and you just play the notes, it doesn't sound right, you know, and the spirit's not there.
It's the mojo.
Yeah. So I love that story about Neil. Like all those years down the road, Neil, after being this big famous drummer, kind of going and breaking it all down again and being like, how can I get better? Like closer to Buddy Rich.
How can I also, it was almost like he was willing to take the chance that there's not only a whole world of stuff he hasn't learned yet, but he's happy to start at zero.
Yeah.
You know, which I was like, no one made you do this, but you saw the need to go back to the original. Why do we play? And most would probably have the same story because it just looked like so much fun. And the first time you learn a song or you get that beat, you go, oh, I did it. I mean, I teach privately these days a lot, you know, both online and in person, guitar and drums. And I live for those moments when I see the you know, the shift and that little paradigm shift in their presence of like, oh, I just did it. And I can witness it. Like, and I see the pieces connect. And I go, that's what I always started playing drums for. That's why I started playing music.
It's great when you see a student do it, right?
Right. Oh man, it's the best. And I love
see them do it, and you're like, and you're excited, and they're excited.
And I like to say, and how long did that take? Oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. See, just give yourself a couple minutes. You know, that's the whole thing. I think about education and connecting the pieces of kind of paying it back, so to speak.
Yeah, sure.
Is trying to encourage whatever level a player is to know that you can always keep improving by just targeting something, but give yourself a break too. Find that balance, find that flow, enjoy the process, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. And reaching that, you know, it's not unlike, I can remember, I don't play anymore, and someday maybe I'll pick it up again, but I used to play golf when I was a kid because I come from a family of golfers, you know. And but the process of like learning that, like the Zen, there was a lot of I found I became better at it because I was never very good at it, but I found I became better at it once I started playing guitar, because my attitude about music and having to kind of relax into it and don't be uptight and stuff like that, it informed golf swing. So it was like the Zen kind of aspect of like letting go and just letting it happen. Like, well, you work on the technique and you get it together and stuff like that. And there's that aspect, but then there's also a certain amount of letting go and just flowing like rhythmically. And so it's the same thing to me, like if like a sport. I mean, you think of basketball about hockey or about, and there's a lot of art to it, like, and the physicality, stuff like that, about the movements so it's like the same to me. It's exactly the same, that part of your mind that just sort of flows with it or whatever and goes with it. And so getting that's the same. It was like learning how to play better golf was like, I'd like to pick it up again someday, actually, because I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed that aspect of it that was really similar to music to me.
Right. And it sounds like one of those kind of things you could take with you, like you can find a range if you have a day off somewhere.
Yeah, and it's a night like on tour for sure. That's one of those things where it might get you the gig. Do you like to golf? And then because we do that on days off, and be like, yeah, let's go. A
friend of mine spent a couple of years playing with Santana, and he told me that one of the biggest parts was that he played tennis, and no one else would play tennis with him. So he just played. I said, "Did you let him win?" He goes, "Oh no, he wanted me to play hard, but he's good at tennis."
That's great. Yeah, there you go. I mean, hey, everybody's got their thing. I remember Jeff Golub, like guitar player. What's that?
I know Jeff. I've met him in the city. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. And he was talking about doing the when he got the Rod Stewart gig. He said like kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like it's a given. You go down and play. You got to be able to play, right? I think they played like one tune. And then Rod was like, great, you want to go across the street for a pint, And he's like, he wanted somebody to hang out with and go to the pub and have a pint, And he's like, if I could hang there, I got the gig, It was like, the music, we got that. You're a great guitar. I mean, he knew he played with, Billy Squier and all these people. And it was like, he was a good guitar player. So it was like, let's get that out of the way. Let's go have a drink, And if you could hang.
Right. It's funny because I remember like seeing shows.
Yeah.
Growing up, seeing a band or being enamored with a band. There's a romantic portion to the chemistry, even as a listener, like, oh man, it would be amazing to play in the Beatles, but no one else was in the Beatles. Those are the guys.
Exactly. That's what I was talking about earlier with the Soundgarden story. It was like, even to imagine it was hard to get my head around. I thought, you better just not think about that because it's too much, I didn't even go there, like thinking about like, well, what's that going to be like? Like if that, like for you, let alone fans,
Right. And when we went to see you guys, I remember just like my friends, we were not sure what to expect. We knew we'd hear the voice. We knew that the band was going to be players that played well. But I remember enjoying towards the end of the set when Jason was really going to town. And he's one of my favorite I guess session drummers just because he just so effortlessly or seemingly effortlessly just nails the gig, and yet he makes the gig sound like it was his gig in the first place.
Sure.
Plays with such like so I remember thinking while my buddies were like, I don't know if that was exactly the fill from whatever. I remember thinking, well, number one, as a session guy, I'm so jealous that this must be the most cool. If you're a fan and this is the gig you got, great. But as a professional, I was also like, no one knows all the other things that had to happen for you to get in that seat. So if you don't play the one fill exactly like the record, that's not the point of the music. And it's also not the point of the gig. And so like a same friend of mine who told me, when you're almost on the stage, just remember they're not getting anyone new. One time he also said, a lot of people could be in the front row and say that I'm better than that guitar player. And they may very well be, but can they hang? Because 2 a.m. when you're dragging some other band member out of whatever bar to get to the hotel and, you're on time at lobby call no matter what. And you're super cool when the PA explodes, what have you. Those are the things that they don't train you for. You kind of learn on the job, but they're so like the bigger picture.
Well, we were now in our band. I mean, because it was a band, and even Chris said that. I remember people saying, "Now that you're solo and you're not in a band anymore," he said, "What do you mean? I'm in a band. I get up there and I play in our band every night, you know." And we were a band. We had our own thing, you know, and we definitely, you know, we hung out. We had a lot of fun. We fought. We like, you know, we had like, you know, we were a band. We became a band over, you know, especially that first year in 2007. We played. I don't even know. I mean, we were pretty much gone from April through December. Wow. We went to Europe like 3 times. We went to Australia, where all of the states. I mean, we became a band. In you know, I would say within 3 months, it was like our chemistry, 2 or 3 months, our chemistry had formed, and then the next 3 years was like that was our band, and we just had a thing, and it was like whether people liked that or didn't, it didn't matter because it was like that was our band and our chemistry, you know. And you saw that, I think, that night, like, or whatever. You went to a particularly hot and sweaty show in Jersey that was like
it was the Starland Ballroom. I want to say it was like July or August, and I could swear that the air conditioning just wasn't on, and I just assumed from my experience with singers who have very wide range, but, you know, have a need to not dry out their voice or what have you. I just assumed that was something to keep it easy for them to sing. And I thought personally, I'll suffer through it.
If that we did a few. It's always amazing to me, like the gigs in this country where, like, there was a place in Nashville we played as well at one point where it was so hot, and I remember hearing a story about how the week before, like, there was a show that had come through town. I'm not sure of the band, but like people were taken out on stretchers because like it was like overheat exhaustion. And I thought, you think they would have gotten it together over the next couple of weeks for that, like with the air conditioning, but no, we played there and it was the same as the Jersey show that you saw. It was so hot, you know, and you know, they pack people in and it's just like hot as hell. But I remember, you know, those are some of the, like you saw, we were a band. We were like, you know, we don't approach it like, we're sideman in the back or whatever. Our band was our band, and Chris encouraged that. It was like, you go for it, and you, like, you know, we had a hell of a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, I would venture a guess that Cornell probably had as far as playing live with a rock band, I think he maybe had the most fun with our band because I mean, the chaos. He would go to Sutter, drum solo like 2 times a night. There'd be 2 drum solos in one night. He would go off like, and I didn't see him do that as much. Like, you know, when he was with Soundgarden, it was like a more, you know, like whatever show. I mean, maybe he did back in the day. I don't know, because I must confess I never saw Soundgarden in the 90s. You know, it was, you know, I'm sure some of the shows back then were pretty crazy and cathartic and stuff. But I mean, I just remember him being like, it was like he could, like he was the boss and the rails were off. And so, you know, he could do whatever he wanted to do musically. He would sometimes make the set list 10 minutes before the gig, you know, and pull out songs that we hadn't played in 2 or 3 months and be like, oh God, well, we put that one on. But he would do whatever he wanted to do and play as long as he wanted to play and just be like, I mean, chaotic moments. Like, you know, I can remember one night him like calling on stage, me and Yogi, like doing some sort of guitar battle. Okay, now you go. And he's just like screwing around, you know, and he had so much fun. And I think people like that because we laughed a lot and they got that energy. And that was our band. It was like we're going to go out and have fun and we're going to interpret his music from his entire career. And there was no restrictions put on him or any kind of pressure to do anything in particular. I don't think for much, especially that first year, it was like, you know, it was crazy and fun. It was so much fun, you know, and I think he had there was a lot of laughs and a lot of good times. So
that's great to hear, man. Because he seemed like he was really happy playing. Of course, he's really, and I remember just being, because I turned to my friend when you guys were doing, I think it's the second encore or something, and I started Slaves and Bulldozers. I went, there's no way this dude's singing this right now. I mean, this is such a high note to hit. Right. The one I do to warm up, because I'm like a tenor, so my voice is a little on the higher side anyway. But that's like if my voice is in its peak form, I can not really, it's almost at the very top just to kind of squeak that note. Yeah. He's going to hit it full voice, but he's going to do it after 2 hours. I was like, maybe it blows him out. He just, I don't know. And I kind of held back. Like,
you just gave me a little
note, I'm okay with it.
And you just gave me like a little chill, like thinking about it, because I hadn't thought about playing that song for a long time. But like, I'm thinking about it going, laying into that riff, and then when he would, it's like, and it'd be in my in-ears really loud. You could just hear it in the PA, and it was like, oh God, man, like, It's like
So
that
what's
moment.
your monitor mix usually? I mean, I'm sure it differs venue to venue a bit.
Yeah, sometimes I used wedges and sometimes I had in-ears, but it was like I just had it was just a mix of the whole band. I mean, I remember I had my guitar panned left and Yogi panned right a little bit, like 10 and 2.
Oh, great. Yeah. Get a
Chris
little more perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just get a mix. And I went through I was actually like I kind of hate in-ears and I went through like a lot of, battles of trying to get them to the point where I was really happy with them,
Right.
I used to do my own mix many times. I mean, we had some great monitor guys, but they would be gracious enough to let me walk over to the console and I learned how to kind of like, okay, I'd go walking and they would see, and the guy kicked my mix, to my mix, and I'd walk over, like literally sometimes during the gig, and just like, grab the hi-hat, I need more of this, need less of that, and then I'd walk away and go back because it was easier than going, can you turn this up or down or like whatever I'm trying to do. Yeah, I could literally just walk over while I was playing and change things,
Curveball.
Yeah.
Steel second. Yeah. That's cool. And I had a sound engineer once on a tour that was like, oh, you're gonna love the in-ear thing, man. He got me packed with the little hard connect. And I remember I committed to it, and it sounded great because I could hear everybody, the horns and everything. But there was one moment where Jones turned to me and mouthed something. And under normal circumstance, because I always wear earplugs, molded earplugs, but I could hear enough to know what he said. But he turned to me, and I can't read lips for the life of me. So I had to say, what? And he just turned away and told somebody else. And I went, oh, I can never have this disconnect because,
that's it.
I've
seen that happen so many times too, man, where somebody talks to somebody and they go, I can't hear you, and then it like, and you go, oh, I've had that experience exactly what you just described. And it's I don't like that aspect of it. We got to the point where actually I got in-ears from Sensophonics that have little mics built in. And so you actually can approach them a little more like a wedge, because you can get ambient sound mixed in and then just get what you need. And Chris actually started using those too, the Sensophonics ambient ears, but they broke on me twice. They were very expensive. They're like $2,500. The packet. It was like, but I was, and I bought them. I paid for them myself. It wasn't a tour expense or something. I just wanted to have the most fun I could have, and I hated that disconnect with the band members as well as the not being able to hear the audience as well. Now there's many gigs, like for example, we did a whole tour opening for Lenny Kravitz in France, and I remember Lenny was like trying to get his pyro. He had like this pyro thing he was doing, and he was trying to get that together and for this big show in Paris. And so we literally got out there on tour and we didn't get a sound check like until maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the tour. And so in those situations, having our own mics and our own monitor console and the in-ears and the mixes set from rehearsal, it was the only way, because otherwise we would have gone on stage totally cold with no sound check. So you could literally, and you know how it is, like Throne Goes or festivals where there's no check. Like if you're going to check at a festival, you got to get there like 8 a.m. It's like nobody wants to do that. So
you're doing at best a line check.
Exactly. So to walk,
you're about to get on stage too. It's like you're in full garb and you gotta
So under those conditions, having in-ears was imperative, because it was like it worked, so there's those situations where it was great.
I mean, I found if I'm given the opportunity, the best of both worlds is if you have one ear and then one floor wedge, because then kind of like sometimes when I have to do stuff with a track, the in-ear is the only way. Obviously, blaring a click track through the monitor. So I did that because Jones he would always have 2 ears, but he'd only use one. So finally one day he just cut one off. And we're like, oh, and he's like, because he was always trying to fudge with it. And there's a freedom, to having a wedge, especially when you're not sitting, of course. You can walk away and go to your amp and hear it, or walk to the drums or walk away. So wedges have kind of a more like in real time, they're pushing air in the same way that, So I think there's an advantage, but you have to also know your stage and know your amps and know your group.
Yeah,
I've learned how to play the right volume for the gig. And
that's another big. Excuse me, 1 second. I'm just gonna. I'm getting a text from somebody that they're probably wondering where I am because I never responded to them. So I'm just gonna say. Are you
okay on time? I'm just flowing, man.
Totally, I'm having a great time.
Thanks,
I'm doing an interview. Cool. So, a band settling in volume wise on stage. That's an interesting subject. Like I always think that, well, obviously the trend these days many times is towards silent stages and not having any amps and everybody
Yeah,
having meters.
there's a time and place for that. I could see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not the way Led Zeppelin and the Who did it and stuff. So I always have this like kind of like, well, if we're making rock and roll, like it depends on the gig. You're right. It's a time and a place, you know,
Yeah.
and if it's appropriate. But if you want to make rock music or something similar or organic, you know, if the band is kind of more acoustic or like, it's a great thing to settle in around the drums. That's what I find.
See,
you know,
that's so good.
The acoustic instrument on stage, unless you're using electronic drums, but the acoustic instrument on stage that you can't really change the volume of, settle in around that. And it doesn't need to be any louder or any quieter than that. So as loud as that snare drum is, you know, like you got to come up to the level where it makes sense dynamically, you know, where you could play like a band in a little club would with no PA except for maybe the vocals through the PA, and it makes sense. Settle in at that volume, and then beyond that, the PA is to amplify beyond that. Don't anybody play too louder than that, and then you're great. Like just set, because then it's great. Then you don't even need monitors. You know how the Beatles, you know how the Beatles used to set up tight, like. I remember learning from somebody like when you're a band and you're evolving, getting like, you know, you're going up in the, you know, get maybe playing bigger places and stuff like that. Don't start spreading out necessarily. Like, and the Beatles never did that. They played tight. And it's like, because then you're all together, because they couldn't hear shit. They didn't have monitors, you know. So it's like they had to play like that, because it's like otherwise you wouldn't be able to hear anything with the screaming and so they had to be close to the drums. And so settle in with amps and everything. I'm not saying you have to do that necessarily, but it is like as tight as you can, I would say. Play like a unit and settle in around the volume of that one acoustic instrument on stage with your amp and the bass amp and everything. And now just fill in with the monitors and then and if you run into a sound guy that kind of doesn't understand that, that's the battle where it's like, oh, it's like, no, just let us do our thing. I've talked at length with like Doug Pinnick. I did an interview where I actually interviewed him from King's X about this, where he was like, we're King's X and we're a band and this is like what we do. And he's really loud on stage and Ty's loud on stage and stuff. But when you go see them, it sounds unbelievable, you know, and they're dynamic. I mean, they're always like full of, you know, they play very dynamically like a band. So it's like, you got to get, you know, you don't want to like, don't screw with that chemistry. If the band sounds good around the kit with the way that, you know, then it's like, now just work with that. And like, I'm speaking kind of, you know, towards.
I totally agree. And also just to kind of throw in, I want to mention, by the way, that we have some people on Creative Exchange, mostly have just been following what we're doing. A couple of people had a couple of quick questions, which you've already answered. But I wanted to, you know, to add to that, just in certain situations, I've been somewhere where I show up first with drums or whatever, and they say, do you want a riser? And the performer in me says, yeah, it looks cool. You can see better. But the musician in me goes, well, now I'm not connected to the same ground. So if one or the other is negotiable, then I'll go with whatever they want to do. But if they're giving me the choice, I'm usually going to choose musically to be on the same level, like those first Led Zeppelin Denmark shows where the Telecaster and they're all around the drums and there's no mics on every drum. And I know, like, if they put me in the penalty box, you know, the plastic thing, this is great. And I want to, I think you'd appreciate this. One of the things I love about learning different styles, because I get really bored quickly about my own playing, so I want to be challenged. It's dynamics are so crucial to making music. It's if you don't have dynamics, it'd be like Siri talking to you and not having a conversation with a person. And when music is viewed that way, that's why when I'm trying to sell, like, you know, the younger generation on what shows, they're like, what's the big deal? We watch everything on YouTube and through our phones. So it's not the same, because you're not watching music being created in real time. And I came up with this very recently, and it sounds a little funny, but I'm sure you could appreciate it. The reason why I don't think music operates the same if we do it virtually or if we're not together is because all five senses aren't being shared. Like, obviously we can see and hear each other, but when you're playing on the same sweaty stage, you're feeling it and you're tasting and you're smelling all these things in real time. And the connection can just be that much more clean and you know, hopefully like a pure vibe. And then you can really let the music speak. But I found sometimes for a drummer where they run into trouble and say, well, this is my volume and this is how I play. And though I can kind of respect that,
Mm-hmm.
I think the room is the instrument, especially for drums. We're pushing air, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm
Mm-hmm.
striking a drum or playing an amp or something, the room is what's going to dictate kind of where our ceiling is of how loud is appropriate. And we
Yeah.
just have to, drummers should be like, sometimes people ask, what do you practice? I practice for songs I need to learn, but I don't really, sit down and do stuff. But if I do practice anything, it's not just timing, it's actually dynamics.
That's cool.
It's like, yeah, you know what I mean? If you can fall into a pitfall of, well, this is comfortable. Yes, but
Sure.
does it serve the music? Can you?
Well, yeah, and I love your attitude about this stuff, because it comes back around to what you were saying earlier about listening to the singer and what the intention of the song, and that's going to inform how you play as a drummer. So that tells me right there that you'd be a great guy to play with, and what you're saying, honestly, because these are the things that, if everybody just, it's really a putting the song first and just taking your ego out of it and stuff like that, isn't it? And just kind of like really wanting the music to, like you also mentioned, an orchestra, when you're playing classical music, it's like the purpose of, performing this piece, play what's on the page, and try and, emote with the right intention, all those, so it's great, but I guess by the same token, not to play devil's advocate or anything like that, but certain music requires, I guess, a certain intention. And it's like, I remember doing a sound check at the Viper Room one night. There was a sound guy that was telling the drummer to not play so hard. He's like, you need to hit the cymbals like half that hard. Like, and the drummer, whatever band it was, because I remember it was a name, like it was a popular band that was playing that night. My band was also playing, so we were waiting for them to check. And the drummer said, dude, if I play like that, I'll get fired. I remember him saying like this, like in other words, like the singer or whoever, the band expects, like, it'd be like telling, Taylor Hawkins or something to, oh, you need to play thinner sticks and hit the cymbals less hard on it. Like, that's not going to happen at a Foo Fighters show. It doesn't matter if it's in a club or it's like your intention and the way that it's not, you can't change, that's not a thing. So if for that music, you have to, I remember playing Viper Room with Steve Stevens. It's like that room they're always telling you to turn down, and I know they have noise complaints from neighbors and stuff. And
when you're in a corner right away, it's the sound isn't even deflecting off the right. Yeah.
But I can remember playing there with Steve, like, so many times, like, no matter how loud you are in there, they're going to tell you to turn down on stage. But I remember playing there with Steve, and when somebody like Steve Stevens, and it was Sebastian Bach singing, and it kind of like an all-star thing, and I was playing in the band that night, and I remember, if Steve's coming in the room and he's playing, he's going to play 100-watt amp, and it's going to be pretty much making full power. Like, that's what's going to happen. And so if you're going to play guitar too, well, you kind of just do that too. And so we 200-watt amps on stage. But you know what? With Sebastian singing, it does, because it's like he's 6'5" and he's got like, it's
you can blow a wall down.
Yeah. So you can watch the videos on YouTube of, like, if you watch like Sebastian Bach, Steve Stevens, Viper, and put that in, you'll see the videos. You can hear everything, but we're playing really loud. And it's like, it was appropriate for the show, was my point. So it's like the you go in and you do that, and it's like the drummer, nobody can play, as the sound guy just doesn't even, I mean, yes, it's crazy loud, but it's like, it's the intention.
Tell Ma. The ice cream
identification. What's that?
Sorry. Yeah, the funny thing is when there's been situations where bands, I think, have members versus like side, hired musicians, there's this fine line between how much they have to kind of set their ground and this is how I play versus, there's any problem you're giving me, I have a solution, And I guess I've done more session stuff than not. So when I've been in that situation and someone says, hey, can you play the cymbals softer? I actually am really proud to say, yeah, no problem. Right. And it's amazing how fast you can make friends with someone, because they're not telling you out of ego, I don't think you're good unless you play soft. It's right. You're helping everyone else by making it sound better. And I found so quickly, it's such a good feeling to be like, yeah, sure, I can play softer. It has to look big, but it doesn't have to, carry. And then that's the
skill. That's the skill of being a sideman. That is. And I live in that world too. Can I tell you one more funny story about that?
Please, sure.
I played with Courtney Love for quite a while. Actually, we did a record together that never came out, but I had written a few tunes with her that were on the Last Hole record, and I actually did some performances with them because they had a band. She had a band, but some of the guys were in England and they had visa issues or something, and so she had TV shows. So we did I played under the Hole name. I did a Tonight Show. I did a Jimmy Kimmel. And I remember her drummer couldn't make it over. So I was kind of like she had her main guitar player made it, but she had a second guitar player that couldn't make it over. So they called me to do it. And it was Jimmy Kimmel and Jack Irons was playing drums. So Jack Irons was Pearl Jam and great.
Is the original
exactly. Wow. And so he's, legendary, he's a drummer. Yeah. Like he's done probably, I'm not sure, like sessions and stuff like that, sideman type of stuff, but that's not really what he's a band drummer.
Yeah.
That's it. And so anyway, we're at the sound check for Jimmy Kimmel. We did sound check. And I remember a woman from the management company walking up and going, guys, so the band, like they were trying to get them on a flight to get over from London, but they'd had these visa issues and it was touch and go. And that's why we were doing this TV show.
Oh yeah. Sure.
And they actually got on a plane and they were on the way over and they were going to land sometime between sound check and the show, which was a couple hours later. And so she said, so, I just wanted to let you know the other guys might be doing the gig, like if they can get here in time kind of thing. So I'm like, my professional, career, whatever, like informs me to, of course, say, oh, well, that's fine. Like I'm going to get paid no matter what. I know that whether or not I'm on the show tonight, then it's going to happen. Jack Irons was like, that's not going to happen, And I was like, I was like, I found it so like, kind of like, yeah, like that's cool. Like cause he's a band guy. He's like, I came all the way here. You can tell Courtney, I came all the way here to do this gig. She asked me to do it. I rehearsed because we did a rehearsal the day before or something. We did a rehearsal and he's like, I rehearsed, I'm here and I'm doing the gig. Like that's what's going to happen, And I was like, that's so band guy.
Right.
And I loved it. Like I loved the, cause I was just like, oh, no problem.
Right. Well, that's also,
Jack was like, no,
you read the room and knew what you had to do.
Well, that's fine. I'm just used to stuff like that, but Jack's like, I'm Jack Irons. Forget it. Like, yeah, you asked me to do this gig. I'm here to do the gig. Like that's he thought this is very disrespectful, and I get that. Like I can see both sides of it, So it was really funny. But
that is
anyway.
Funny. Well, funny you mentioned
we did the show, by the way. We did do it. I didn't get there in time, so it wasn't even an issue.
Well, I had a last minute call in for something very similar. It was I was playing a morning show.
Okay.
At 6 a.m. We had to be at 4:30. There was no way I was going to sleep. I was too excited. Never met the artist. I just knew the original band, and they couldn't get to the gig because they were driving to the next gig, so they couldn't fly them all back for this morning and get them there. So they called in a New York band. I get the call. We rehearsed once. We knew we were only playing 2 songs and barely. We play something into and out of the commercial, and then we performed it. But I was pretty excited, and it was going to be a Saturday morning. So Friday night, I went to the city. I hung up at the Apple Store. I saw the Dark Knight movie that came out like that weekend.
Right.
I got, I'm a night owl anyway. I show up at the studio. I'm excited. Everyone else tried to sleep, and they were like, "Why?" Like that just you tried to sleep 2 hours, and you really almost are more tired.
Right.
And we're getting ready to do it, and I'm sitting down at the kit. And he shows up and he turns around and he says, play the twist. And no one else is even wired in it. He goes, great. And he walks away. And I went, okay, this is going to be exciting. And what's funny, it was Chubby Checker. So classic. So cool. I have so many cool, like I only played with him twice and it's so cool.
That's awesome. Chubby Checker is great.
We had to kind of get in and just do it. But there was a moment when I thought, well, what if they do get the other guys in? And I just had to be kind of like cool with it. Same thing.
Yeah.
And then when I got to do so because I think I was cool with it, and they did the job, and he did one thing at the end that I will say, this is why I don't always call some of my friend musician. I have friend musicians, of course, and I have work musicians. I think the difference is sometimes in the subtlety of knowing different languages. He turned around when they said, "That was great. Well, we're gonna. Do you want to play us out?" And Chubby turns around. He goes, "Rock, blues, and E, 2, 3, 4," and we just went. But I played all these blues gigs, so that just clicked. I knew what to do.
Sure.
You know, E, D. What? Sorry. Hold on.
Surprise.
Oh, thank you. Okay, save it for me for later. Thank you. You know me so well.
Hi. Hey, you guys.
Go. Here, take this one. Put it in the freezer for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, very nice.
I love the SpongeBob one.
Oh, SpongeBob. You're funny, man.
I always get it.
And so it was just an exciting thing, but going kind of to give credit where credit's due, the fact that you rolled with it, that's the reason why I got called the next time. You know, it wasn't that I played or whatever, it was that I rolled with stuff. So when they needed somebody next time, I got the gig call. You know,
well, there you go. Yeah, that's the thing, and that's what I was mentioning about Chris earlier, where he was like, if he pointed, you goes drum solo like the Sutter or whatever, he'd just do it, or like whatever, like these different things that when you're in a band, you know, you have that more like it is a chemistry, and there's you know, 3, 4, 5 egos or whatever involved, and that's what makes then some of that tension and stuff. And maybe those things happen in bands, but sometimes maybe they like those crazy moments where, you know, when you got a singer and they've been used to being in a band, and then they get the freedom of having maybe their own group where they can just do what they, you know, and kind of direct. That can be really fun for them, I think. And that's where, if you can roll with those moments and stuff, and it can be fun for the audience too. I think that's what makes, like I was saying about our band, I know our band was really fun. And I know that that's what people, when people talk about going to see the shows with Chris, with us, that's the part that I think is maybe the most, like, my memory of it, and the way that people say your shows were really like, it was so fun because you would do all the music from all the band. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't this like, oh, we're not going to play songs by your last band, or not that ever would have been a thing, but he could just do whatever he wanted, and that just and he'd kind of direct to tell us what to do, pick whatever songs he wanted, and that's fun. So if you can roll with that, sometimes an artist's solo shows are kind of the most fun. I mean, when I think about like Keith Richards' band, you know, like Expensive Winos, or you know, like, that's just fun with Waddy on guitar, or like when you're outside of the confines of the Stones all of a sudden, or you know, Paul McCartney. I mean, like, you know, his band is really fun. I mean, you know, those guys are, you know, Abe and his energy, and like
play at all, but yeah, they seem to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I know Daltrey, like when he does, I mentioned earlier, my friends play with him. I know he really enjoys like kind of playing, you know, you're going to get something different than if it's the Who. You know, you're going to get these fun kind of, and that's when you got some sidemen there and the singer just gets to cut loose, you're going to see a different side of that artist that you might not get to see when they're in the confines of their band. So it's fun.
Absolutely. But with the Jones thing, Jones used to say sometimes, he's like, hey, you know, when the moment hits you, be big. You know, stick twirl, throw, you know, he said, in a very like affirmative, I think he deserved, you know, every right to say this. He say, you can't outshine me. My name's already on the front, but I want you to give it a lot of energy because that's what we're here to do. And so never like competitive. Obviously we knew he was the boss, but he liked being able to go, you know, feature people. And through that,
takes the heat off of them for a minute. They can.
I was going to say, I got another gig in that similar circuit. Played with David Cassidy for a few years, and David's whole thing, because he really loved playing guitar. That was always his deepest love, was playing guitar. He didn't play a lot in the show, but he would have a point, even if we were doing a 45-minute set, he had to do this segment where every player did a little solo piece.
Cool.
He was so happy when we did it, because I just thought he was just doing it because he was trying to run down the clock. But one time he goes, this is why I have people in my band, because I want to have fun watching them. He's like, I've played these songs for years.
Right.
I hear it new, and it's exciting to have players. And he says, and I like to have a band that has fun that way. So it was like a jam band doing 70s pop, which was similar, kind of sounding to what you're saying. And I think people did learn, like they learned to enjoy that. If they thought they were just going to hear a record played live, that wasn't really a thing. But
Sure.
I enjoyed like that chemistry or that the danger.
You know? Yeah, you get a little more than you know. I played with a French artist, Michel Polnareff, who's like a legendary face. He's impossible to categorize, but he, you know, he's like a combination of, I don't know, Elton John and yeah, but he's very distinctly French, you know, and they really love him over there. And so it was one of those things where I learned the music, and I didn't really know what it was going to be like when I got there. And then sure enough, I get over there and it's just like, he's just this icon, you know. It's fun, like going to other countries and realizing that there's these artists that you might not be familiar with. It's like going to another planet and playing music. It's so fun. Right. You know, these songs where you play it, like you learned it in rehearsal, but you've never heard it before, you know, and you learn it and you go out and do it. And then you go do it at the show and there's like 20,000 people singing it back to you. And you're like, I guess this was a really big hit, you know, but that's really fun. But anyway, he liked that aspect of the show too. And he would sometimes just leave the stage. One of the things he wanted was a guitar battle, like duel, you know, kind of thing, old school. And the other guitar player in the band was Tony McAlpine, who's like ridiculous, you know, on guitar. And I'm like, oh, great. This kind of came up. I think we were already on the road when it came up that he wanted to add this to the show. And I was like, oh, I get to go up and do a guitar solo battle with Tony McAlpine and get like my ass handed to me every night. But so I had to come up with like, okay, well, how am I going to attack this? And Tony's amazing. You know, he's great. So we did this whole fun thing and went back and forth and stuff. And I would I had a lot of fun with it and it was cool. But I always remember him at the end saying, Polnareff was like, I don't know, at the end, you've got to do something big that really like, and he'd go play like Smoke on the Water. And I go, I was thinking to myself, Smoke on the Water. Like, it's such a like kind of like.
But you know, like, he probably knew that the audience would respond.
Oh my God. Did he? And I didn't really think that one through, you know, like, and it's Europe, which Deep Purple was like such a, you know, and I mean, I love the song. I don't want to sound, but you know, it's just so like, it's a little like playing the Stairway to Heaven riff or something. It's like, you know, it's just that riff. So it's like, it's such a like, so the first time I did it, oh my God, like, cause we would get to the end and I would start the riff then and go into it after Tony would kind of like, you know, smoke me on guitar. And then I'd be like, and then I'd go into Smoke on the Water as like, okay, well, how about this then, you know? And that was the attitude. And the crowd just went like, yeah. And it was like this amazing energy, you know, and it got to be so fun. I was like, oh my God. And then we'd join up and do the solo, or sorry, we'd play the chorus in harmony on guitar, and we'd join it back to back and play, and that's how the bit would end. But Polnareff, you know, he loved that, and the fact that he would leave the stage and, you know, let us do that for like, you know, 4 or 5 minutes or whatever, and he'd get to chill, and we'd have this whole thing, and then he'd walk out and just kind of be like, oh, that was fun, you know, and then like go on the show. You would get these things, exactly what you're talking about, that you hadn't expected you were gonna get, like when you maybe walked in, you know, that was the and it's really fun. They're smart that way, and these are the things they can do when they're not, you know, if it's a solo artist, and you know, you make it a show, you make it fun, make it, because we're there to, hey, we're entertainers at the, you know,
entertainers. That's a very, very big part of the job, is being able to call on the, you know, I think of it a lot of times as like when you have one of those birthday party like clowns, like people think it's an easy job, but then you try to make an animal out of the balloon and he's just banging them out, and you know,
exactly.
Animal. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to keep the crowd entertained, those kids, right? It's a big job. So it's like,
when and on the road, like those are the nights you remember. Like we had a piano player in Davy's band that there was one piece, it was a jazzy tune, you know, loved getting to pull out the brushes and do that whole tradition thing, but he would always take the same solo, and you know, a lot of times we did backline stuff, so he'd always get a Triton, you know, pretty tried and true. And he'd do this one solo on Vibe. So one night, either he got a different model or something, he didn't press the right patch, and it went to, and it was called like Voodoo Child. It was like full on. So it's the same notes.
Wah keyboard.
Over this like jazz tune, and we're all looking at each other like, keep a poker face, keep a poker face. And Jones totally played it off like nothing happened. We figured, you know, if you have a poker face, sometimes if you telegraph something's wrong, they'll know something's wrong. But if you keep it cool. Oh, I broke a string. Oh, my snare drum fell over. Like if you don't telegraph it, 9 times out of 10, the audience is engaged. They're not looking for those problems. And
sometimes it's better.
Right. And then, and that's what happened. It ended up making the night so fun after that.
Right.
You could see he had to commit at that very moment. He went, well, I'm here now. I can't wait to fix it. It's 8 bars. So we just finished it out. And no one said anything. We kind of, it's an hour later when you hit the dressing room, you kind of forget it. And Jones comes in, he goes, Jimi Hendrix opened up for the Monkees. I didn't know he was back. Like, oh, he noticed. Oh man, it was so funny. It was like, it wasn't a mistake. It was just a thing, and we ran with it, and it was fun,
Man, that is the key. I mean, like, I get a lot of inspiration from Jack White, and anybody that's watching this that's probably heard this story from me before. But one of the most inspiring things that where you got little things that you remember, like on a gig, so that if you ever run into one of these moments, you channel that, get into that energy. I love his energy in situations like that, and his like, he just has this like wrong notes. What's a wrong note? Like, give me a break. Like, there is no. So okay, in the movie It Might Get Loud, he talks about Son House and about how his favorite record was a Son House record, and how he's stomping and singing to the stomping, and he goes, there's not even any instruments, it's just him singing and stomping and so he's like, that's so cool. So anyway, so they did a whole week on the Conan show with the White Stripes, and on the last night he did this thing where he was playing a guitar solo, and he ran over to Conan's desk and he put the guitar flat on his desk, and then he starts playing it in front of his face, like slide, like it was crazy. It was wild and fun, and so after the solo is over, he grabs the guitar and he runs back over to the mic, and somehow in that process the guitar somehow got unplugged, like the wireless or whatever, and so now there's no guitar. So what do? What he does is throw the guitar down, grab the vocal mic, and just finish the song full force, vocals and drums, you know, and like with all this attitude, and it's like better than it was so rad, it was exciting, and it was amazing, and it was live, and it was like, that is so cool. And like, so the Son House thing, stomping and vocal, he knows he doesn't even need the guitar. It's about your intention, and I love that movie. I became a big fan of his after seeing that movie.
Yeah, me too.
And how he, builds the guitar at the beginning, like with the piece of wood and the pickup, and puts a string on it, and then goes, there's a guitar,
Like, yes, that's all you need.
And there it is, and that's why that's how you, and he's great live. I've seen him, with Raconteurs, and, he's like,
Raconteurs are great.
Yeah, he was awesome, and it's just, so I love that energy, whether or not even it's outside of whether you like what he does musically. It's just like his intention is so what it's all about, so cool.
And that movie, I'm glad you brought it up, because that like a very innocent thing, I think it's in all of us, even when we're maybe if we're in awe of a player. Like, I love hearing these things from you, because I consider you such just a highest bench player. You really, you just play at such an amazing level, but I know that was earned, and there are probably things you still work on, and probably things that you're like, oh man, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to learn to do this
every day. Yeah.
And in that movie, one of the most inspiring parts, it's like 56 minutes in. I know it because I'll go to it sometimes to tell people, this is why you got to watch this movie. Watch, because if they don't know Jimmy Page, I'm like, watch when he plays Whole Lotta Love. The Edge stands up like a kid who just
that's right,
first guitar.
Yeah.
And then even Jack White breaks character and starts smiling.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
It's just Jimmy Page is playing Whole Lotta Love. Like makes the hairs on your arm stand.
Yeah.
And I've listened to it and I've watched it, and there's a couple of bum notes, like they're not like completely clean.
But then it wouldn't be Jimmy Page.
It's Jimmy Page, but it's the bravado and the raunchiness of how he played it that even they were like, wow, I'm so excited right now witnessing it. And
you're right that you nailed it. Like Jack White breaks character, because he's kind of playing it cool in that movie a little bit, like like he didn't want to get too starstruck, and then he just like he looks like he smiles.
Yeah, I felt like at the same time his mind went, I can't believe this is Jimmy Page, and this was my idea. I'm so glad we made this work. I would have loved to have seen Tom Morello in that too. As much as I love The Edge, and I do have a love for The Edge, I feel like, have you seen the masterclass that Tom did?
I know, but I have a subscription to that, so I should watch that.
Oh man, I got that subscription this year, and I've watched his a couple times, like in pieces, because I just want to watch, like, oh yeah, let me go over that thing that he was talking about. But it's just so fun to watch someone talking just for what we're talking about, he's so authentic. The way he plays is so authentic.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing with Chris. It was funny doing a gig at in Vancouver at the Commodore Ballroom. No, wait, we weren't at Commodore Ballroom. Tom was at Commodore Ballroom, I think, and it was like the night after us. It was like we were like, you know, yeah. I think it was the either night before or the night after Cornell gig, and we were playing at a different venue. But anyway, we were all in the same town at the same time, and we went down to see Tom's show, and met him, and we're like, hey, we're Chris's band and stuff. Oh, cool, And then we ended up taking Tom over to the Roxy, which is a legendary old rock and roll bar in Granville.
Oh yeah.
And Tom got up, and it's like 2 a.m. Like, they stay up super late up there. And it's like 2 a.m. He got up and did with his band a few tunes, like, and he played a Rage song. I can't remember what it was, but I remember, like, he didn't have any of his gear. He didn't have any of his stuff. It was like some other guy's rig, and he just slayed it, man. Like, he got up and did his whole, like, stuttering thing with the pickup switch, and like all this. It was like, how's he doesn't even, he just got up and on someone else's rig, and it did not matter. He just like killed it. And they brought the house down, man. Like, I remember the place just went crazy because he just came over from next door, and it was like, it was so cool. But
that is awesome.
Yeah, he's I mean, he's the real deal. Like, he's a rock star. I mean, it's like that energy of like same thing as the Jack White thing. He's got that energy,
But funny you say it that way too, because my instinct also listening to them, why I gravitated towards these type of documentary style things, is like there's a commonality in this level of, I guess, nerdity, or like just such a passion for not only music, but like even the inner workings of the instrument, almost like lightsabers, how they build, the Jedi build their own. I was like, oh man, this, look at their guitars, like Eddie Van Halen's guitar.
Like Eddie Van Halen, yeah.
There's no reason why he could have had any guitar under the sun, but he made that guitar out of all this, ideas, I guess, and he didn't want that, he did want this, but he could have sounded like that on anything. But I guess
what if I tried this and put this in like this pickup, and what if I slant it because the pull pieces don't quite line up because they didn't make wide spaced pickups back then. And then what if I put a quarter on it so that I can drop it down when I'm flat tuning to down tuning to D to play Unchained or whatever. So like all that stuff is just like he was a crazy innovator and so cool, and that energy. Yeah. And Morello totally did the same thing. Actually, what I love about Morello is his attitude about gear and stuff was so great. And from a creative, because a lot of what I do now, like with YouTube and stuff, is I try a lot of gear, and I make videos about it, and it's all this new stuff, and it's great because it's fun new toys and it's awesome. But there's the other side of it, which is you can go down that rabbit hole of thinking buying some sort of box is going to make you a great player or whatever, and that whole thing. And I love Tom's. I always like to keep it in perspective, because his whole attitude of like, well, and he's talked about this in interviews where he's like, I had this amp, it was just an okay Marshall of the era, and I had a PV 412 cabinet, and this one guitar, and I had this little pedal board with like 5 pedals, and it's got a DOD flanger or whatever, and this phaser and a delay, and he says, one day I just like set all the knobs where it made a good sound, like not even a great sound, just as good a sound as I could get with that stuff. And I set all the knobs, and then I just said, okay, that's my setup, that's my tone. And then proceeded to do all of Rage Against the Machine and Audio Slave with that rig. Like, never get really, I mean, he augmented by getting a guitar too. He got that like a, cheaper Fender Tele at some point, and a couple different guitars, but like he almost, maybe the whammy wasn't part of the equation then, and then it became, but he barely like deviated. Like that same PV cabinet, he still uses it, the same stuff, that same old Marshall JCM 800, which isn't even it's the one that most people don't like, the dual channel one from the era. It's like, and that's how he did his whole career. It's like, that's brilliant. He's the ultimate example of that. It doesn't matter,
And there's no way it was contrived that way. I think he just kind of, like many of the great players, found a true thing that he loved doing and pursuing, which was his voice, maybe an amalgamate of all the things he liked. But he even thought outside the box guitar wise. Like he could do traditional solos. There's like one kind of traditional solo on the first record, and then everything else is more of his like sound effect, soundscape stuff.
Yeah.
And I was so like relieved to hear that when he talked about it, he's like, well, yeah, you could do that, but this sounds more like jungle sounds or industrial sounds. And when I think of instruments and the lineage of music and the sounds that the instruments make now, I think it's easy to forget that before electric instruments, everything was acoustic, and so many instruments were made to maybe connect with different things in nature. I feel like the train beat came out around when the trains were happening,
Sure.
you know, and the sound of people on like a porch kicking, that became like the kick drum sound. And there's a lot of percussion stuff from different countries that it emulates rain or water,
Right.
or, heartbeats. And I just think this is where I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how music progresses, because I'm like, well, that's the sounds of life around us once upon a time. Now we're in a digital age where most of the young ears, they're so used to hearing these chirping noises. It makes perfect sense why dubstep and then now this trap music, like sonically, resonates with them. Because to me, it sounds like, wow, that's really one frequency dimension. It's just really stagnated. But
Yeah.
you're hearing it representing like if you hear text ring 70,000 times a day, and then someone does a song and they use it as the backbeat, you're like, hey, they kind of respond to it. So I think when you open up your I guess your ears to the option that you might not do the traditional thing, but you just go down this, well, this is an like this path hasn't been walked yet. So you got to get kind of make your way. But there's something to be said for when like that come out. It's like half the reason why Tom Morello, I think, was so successful with the band is it was just totally inspiration. He just was inspired to do his thing. And then they came to him. And
I mean,
really
you can get sounds from anywhere, and then it becomes a thing and becomes more a part of musical culture. Like I like watching how Billie Eilish and Phineas, take the sound of a crosswalk beeping or whatever,
right.
and
they pitch it down, and
he records it and then loops it, and then here's where this came. That kind of stuff is just really like, in electronic music or any kind of modern music production. I mean, it's kind of cool because you can manipulate sound in so many different ways. Like computers can be, they can be, a lot of folks are sort of bemoan like, Pro Tools and, using auto tune and these kinds of things. And I agree with a lot of that, but also they can be this really fun tool for, obviously electronic music. And it's just like, well, the sky's the limit. You can make music out of all kinds of things that you wouldn't have been able to before, and make new sounds, and that's fun. It's just like you don't have to doesn't have to be this limit put on.
Did you see the Sound City documentary?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and there was something really I thought it was really interesting when Trent Reznor was talking about organic versus digital sounds, and he kind of really was. He could make a very valid argument that he's built a career on digital instruments.
He has
drummers, by the way, because his programming drums are great. They're so cool.
Yeah, I mean, he's the ultimate kind of representation. I mean, especially, even getting into outside of Nine Inch Nails and into his soundtrack work and stuff like that. He's just such a creative guy and has a real, I mean, where he goes, he's a visionary for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've always considered a lot of his music cinematic,
Yeah, big time.
And so when I heard that it was going to be in a movie, I definitely was excited to hear it.
Yeah.
But what's funny is when I watched Soul the first time with my kids a few weeks ago, there were little moments where I remembered, oh, I know why I know that melody. That's that same progression at the end of one of these Nine Inch Nails songs. It was just these little nuggets of Reznorness that I thought like, oh, that's cool. But for the most part, he was just doing the gig, and it was really good for the movie. And I just thought that was such a nice progression to see someone who kind of doesn't have to just write for a band.
It totally makes sense. I mean,
and music can be connected to all these different things.
Yeah, he's a natural at doing that, and it's great because he can do that forever and doesn't necessarily, it might come a time where like you don't always want to have to go on the road. You don't want to have to, so he's just diversifying as a musician, and it really works. Like he's so good at it at scoring. So obviously he's won a lot of awards, and it's very effective. I mean, I think the first score might have been the movie about Zuckerberg, right? That he did, and it was amazing. The about Facebook. And,
Facebook. Yeah.
Heck, was that movie called?
The Social Network.
Yeah, I guess that was it. Yeah, and I remember hearing the score and going, "God, this is good." Like
right.
But,
well, it goes also to like Nine Inch Nails is another good example of putting on a big live show, different from the record. Like I love the records, but live using a band, but it's all about the lighting. I mean, their light show is amazing, and it changes every tour. It's a new.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. That's one of my biggest regrets. I auditioned for them in 2005 and almost was doing it. So I got to go in and rehearse with them and stuff like that. And then the last minute they picked Aaron North on guitar. And I was depressed for about 6 months after that. Because once again, I was in that stage where I was maybe tying too much of my worth into a gig. But I had a crazy month and a half of like, am I doing this Nine Inch Nails tour, and or am I not? But it was really incredible getting to go in and play with him. And
the connection happened. Were you called in by someone you knew?
Yeah, it was kind of a big call, like a a lot of people went out for it and auditions and stuff, and it was a long process of actually like him picking someone else and then that not working out, and him calling me after trying to get in touch with me for like a couple weeks because he was emailing me, and he was sending emails to the wrong email. That's what it was. And he's like, haven't you been getting my emails? When he called me, I was like, no. And then I realized what email he was sending them to. And it was this a dude who incidentally has the same name as me and lives in Denmark. and I met him. He actually came to a Chris Cornell show years after that. So his name's Peter Thorn. And,
wow.
and so he was, so anyway, but the realization that Trent had when he was like, you mean I've been emailing some random guy? I was like, I guess so. But anyways, he was really stressed out because I hadn't found a guitar player yet. And he's like, how soon can you come down here, like play? I was like, because it'd been a few weeks since the audition. I was like, can I go over the songs for a day and I can come down tomorrow? And he's like, come down tomorrow and just get the gig. He said, come down and just get the gig. He sounded really stressed, I remember.
Wow.
And then I went down and played. And anyway, long story short, next few days I was in there rehearsing with them. And it kind of seemed like I was doing it for a minute and then it didn't end up happening. But it was really exciting. And I remember like those little anecdotes, like I was talking about Tim Bogert when we first started talking stuff, little things like that. I remember him saying, like, I remember the keyboard player playing something, him stopping the band for a minute and saying, what's that sound that you're playing? And the guy played and he was great too, but he was playing and Trent goes, I don't think it's special enough. He said that everything that's going on all the time has to be special. Each part, each sound has to be really, he goes, don't just fill space. Like just everything going on has to have a purpose. Like, kind of like in an orchestra when there's performing a piece of classical music that's brilliant, everything has to have a purpose. Don't just play to just play, And I was like, oh, I always remember him saying that. There's a few other things, but it was really, really all these people you come into contact with, you take something out of it, it's
right.
Amazing. I would have loved to have done it. I felt like I had a really good connection with him. I feel like maybe I wasn't ready for the, like, why didn't I get it? I feel like maybe I wasn't as like that rock star, je ne sais quoi, like attitude, energy thing. Maybe I didn't have together at that point. This is going back 2005 or 6, before Chris Cornell, before right. And I feel like I was maybe maybe I was putting out a little too much nervous energy, or like I wasn't like, but like musically, he really I had a really good connection with him. I felt like, the tones and the parts, and like he would ask me to do something, I would do it, and he'd go, "That's perfect. It's exactly what I want," and like things like that. And I felt like this is going to work out, like it's going to be great. And then it didn't happen. But that's life, you learn,
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed to hear you didn't get it. That sounds like a no-brainer. That's
when I saw Aaron, because so you mentioned the lighting and stuff, because I went to the tour, the With Teeth tour it was, and I saw Aaron play, and then I was like, oh, it made sense to me. He's crazy. I mean, he'd break his guitar on the third song, Like, well, what are you going to do now? You just smash your guitar up or knock the cabinet over. He had that thing, which is a big part of Nine Inch Nails live.
Yeah, element of danger, right?
Yeah, that crazy, like, you know, like, and that's, I guess, what they wanted, you know, and maybe that's what I think they made the right choice, you know, at that point, if that's what they wanted. So it's like, so that you learn, once again, you know, you learn every little, like, you got to read the room and figure out what, like, you know, or maybe it's just not, maybe it just wasn't me. I don't know, or isn't me, like, quite to that level of that guy. Like, you can't do everything. You can't be the right.
Right. No one person's right for every gig. That's
Yeah.
a good one, I remember. But what's funny is I remember reading an article, I think when Alessandro played with them. Right?
Alessandro, yeah.
And I think if I understand it, he showed up like an hour and a half late and didn't know any of the songs. And he got the kick. And I went, well,
that makes sense to me. Because the guitar player that they picked for the gig initially, before he called me and had me come back and stuff, the guy he picked actually evidently wasn't that great of a guitar player, and I was told was like crawling around on the ground, like making like pig noises and faces or something like that, right. Like during his audition. And he got the gig, and I was like, that's when I was clearly like, well, maybe I just approached this the entirely wrong way, like by spending so much time on the music and learning. That's what I meant when I said I had this great connection with him musically. Because when I went in to do the initial audition, they told me, here's 7 tunes, learn them all. You're only going to play 3 at the audition, but you don't know which ones they'll be. He will pick. And I went in and I learned live versions. I learned, like you were saying, like, you know, I learned the album version. I learned the live version. I learned alternate endings. I tackled everything. So when he asked me, okay, let's do this one. And by the way, the audition was him sitting like out in a, you know, like it was like a rehearsal studio, and he was sitting in like kind of like bleachers or a bench, you know, and I couldn't really see him, and the lights were on me, and I was playing to tracks by myself. It was scary as hell, like on stage, you know, with him watching, you know, and I couldn't really see him. I could hear him because he was talking to me, but he was, you know, 20 feet away and 30 feet away. And he'd say, okay, let's do this one. And then I go, okay, do you want me to do the live version from 94 or the album version? Because I learned both. Like, what would you prefer? And he, I think, found that kind of amusing. And he was like, how about we start with this one? You know, this version. I was like, okay. And so I'd do it. And he'd go, that was great. And then he'd go, okay, let's do this one. And anyway, I ended up playing all like 6 tunes all the way through. He just kept asking me to do it. So it wasn't just 3. And then at the end, he said, how did you learn Hurt? And I said, I learned it on nylon string guitar. And, you know, just like the kind of like the previous live version from the last tour they done. So I learned it on nylon string. She said, great, I'm going to come down and sing it with you. And I was like, wow. Okay. So he got up and they set a mic up for him, and he came up and we just stood face to face, and I played Hurt with him, you know, on nylon string. And somebody pulled me aside after out in the hallway, and they go, he hasn't even sung like that, like live, like in it with anybody for like 3 years or something. Like, that was really cool, like that he did that. You know, I was like, I think I got this gig. Anyways, then I get the call the next day. He went with the guy that was crawling around, you know, making weird noises and stuff like that. So there was obviously something else that this guy brought to the, you know, to the party.
You can almost never know. And, you know, somebody told me this once, like, because I was bumming out about a gig I'd had. I kept trying to read this guy. You know, I spent 6 months on the road with a guy that was notorious for changing rhythm sections constantly.
Okay.
Normally, a bass player went through 2, 3, 4 drummers. I went through 5 bass players in my time. But I remember telling a friend, I was really bummed. I left the gig because our daughter was going to be born, and I was relieved to be home. But it was, you know, good touring. But I remember just feeling like, man, I don't know if I was ever getting better. I recorded every night, and I would review it. And sometimes I'd even try to get him to listen to a little bit just to give me more feedback. And it just never, and at the end of the night, he'd be like, yeah, you play great. But during the show, he would have this nervous energy, and he'd bark all these orders at you and all this stuff. And I would definitely not take it personally, but it was exhausting. And somebody feeling like, I don't really know what this guy wants.
Sure.
I just don't think I'm doing it. I'm not giving him what he wants every time. Naturally, I'm trying to chase it. And that's a really weird, like, dynamic. Because as a drummer, especially when you're playing with like, let's say mostly with solo guitar, I had to follow his subdivision. That's what he seemed to like. He liked if I improvised, but he liked that he dictated the subdivision, which is not a very common way to do it. most of the time, if you're playing a shuffle, it's a shuffle. Sure, you could feel it a few different ways, grease it up, more Chicago, more Texas, what have you. But even that is just still kind of limbering for how everybody feels. You know, everybody should be feeling good. But he would have this way of kind of playing and being like, no, you have to be on top of it and then behind. But he wouldn't even say it. He'd just do it. And I, you know, feel like there was always this kind of weird tether. But anyway, when I left and I kind of got some space away from it, and I talked to a professional friend of mine, he goes, yeah, man, you know, there are some gigs where you got to, you know, just learn the songs. And some gigs you got to sight read. It's the gigs where you have to mind read. That's a trick you can't learn. I went, you're right. You're right.
Dude, so much of it is the psychology of reading the room, and that's and it is, you used the term exhausting. It can be exhausting. And hopefully as you get older it gets easier, and as the same situations that you might not have perceived when you were younger come up, you're like, I know what's going on here. And then you get to, you know, it becomes easier. And also just as you get older, I guess, you know, you got less fucks to give or something like that, you know? So it's like, it gets easier to kind of like, you know, it gets easier to just flow with it. And that's ironically what that artist probably wants, is just a natural feeling. Confidence, you know, confidence is like a huge,
with a nice balance of like, I guess, I mean, to me that you got to sit and play her with him and that he wanted to do it sounds like such a milestone moment, not just because obviously it's great that you got to do it, but I think it's even more badass that you weren't afraid to do it. Because I think for most players it would be like the do or die moment, and they'd be like, but you just did it.
You know, to be in the moment and then realize it's happening and be present and really just enjoy it is the key, I think, because it might not happen again, which it never did. So you know, at least not it. That was the initial audition. Then they pick another guy. Then I get a call 2 weeks later saying, why haven't you been answering my emails? And he calls me back, you know, and then for 10 minutes, I thought maybe I'm in the band, you know, I'm doing this thing, you know, so that happened. And it kind of took it to another level for a minute, but you never know. Maybe it comes around again someday. Maybe we do something together. I don't know, but you got to just be in the moment in those moments and really be present. I mean, I remember I've had the great fortune, you know, like Don Henley and Chris and like these moments of like playing with these guys and being like one-on-one. And, you know, you said earlier, like, that, you know, somebody told you, you know, I want you to like, you know, you're not going to upstage me. Like you know, my name's on the marquee. So I use the analogy of the Clark Kent Superman thing. Being a sideman is playing that role of Clark Kent Superman, because the rock star gets to live in the Superman persona 24/7. The artist, that's their gig, you know, and it's a challenging gig, and it's like they've got trials and tribulations of their own, but they live in that, you know, they're the boss. You as the sideman, when you get off stage, the trick is to go into Clark Kent and be like, you know, you're one of the crew, essentially. You're part of the hub of the, you know, or you're a cog in the wheel, essentially. I don't mean that as any kind of like, but it's true. You know, I don't view myself any different than the fellas building the stage or the sound guy or whatever. We're all part of a team making this guy's show happen. His name is on the marquee or her. But there's the part of the gig is those moments on stage where they want you to act like them, or at least 5% underneath there, that you got to go to the front of the stage, play to the guy in the back row and put your arm up and play that role and get into that headspace. And then the trick is to know when to step back and dial it down, you know, and that's the, you know, to me, that's the trick, you know?
Yeah.
So,
you know, this is maybe some strange positive out of, you know, your experience with it. I have always had this looming back in my mind, like when I play a show, and it could be anywhere, I never know who's in the audience.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily feel like you have to, you know, placate the audience like, oh, let me show off every minute. But there's a part of my, I guess, upbringing or something that if I ever had a moment where I was maybe feeling like uninspired by my own playing, or I'm playing a gig, I'm not necessarily thrilled about the music. There's a reminder I've always given myself. I never told anyone this before, so this is a new thing. I've always said Trent Reznor might be in the audience. So play like Trent Reznor's there, because he's going to scrutinize every bit that you don't give if you don't give it all you got. And if you play to 10 people in a cover band in a bar on a Tuesday night, and he goes, man, that's what I need in my band. that's my goal, is to try to,
Yeah.
just always ascend as high as I can and be in the moment and play well, because there might be someone of that caliber that I respect, of course, and love the music, but also I think that they've gotten to a point where they're almost like known for being super critical. But
yeah, well, two quick examples. I was really lucky when I first got to LA, and the first band I got in, my buddy Frank that I said worked with Roger Daltrey, Daltrey. So that guy, at the time back when I first met him, I was 19, and he was playing with Don Henley. He was his musical director, but I'd also just gotten a gig with Mick Jagger. So he did the Wandering Spirits solo album. They only did a couple gigs, but he made the record with them and played a couple shows with them and stuff for that record. So here's this guy that I'm just like kind of enamored with, because he's like late 30s and just like, obviously kind of where I want to be.
Mhm.
So I got in his original band. That was the band I joined that got the Japanese record deal. So that was
Right. Oh, wow.
So we played in a band together, and he was, I learned so much from this guy. But one of the things I learned from him, we would go do cover gigs, like I mentioned earlier in LA. You had to go to Pasadena and stuff. So we would play in Pasadena or Acadia or like different, out, and we would like play a few of our original tunes. It was kind of the opposite, actually, what I said about Canada, where it was 2 speakers on sticks, and like, throwing an amp up in the bar and playing, but we had a lot of fun. And he would show up, and hump the PA into the bar and like set up his amp. And here he's playing with Don Henley and Mick Jagger, and he would come and like, and then we would do these gigs. And sometimes there'd be, like you said, 10 people there. In particular, I remember doing a gig as a trio one night where I played bass. He was playing guitar and singing and drums, and we did Hendrix and some Zeppelin and stuff. And there was like 4 people there. But the way that he played guitar and sang, he would have those 4 people to the front of the stage by the end of the set, just going, yeah, man. Like, and he would just be like going off and like health. He's definitely got an ego, but he like had like this healthy ego where he smile like Eddie Van Halen, like smile and play and like arm up in the air and just like dynamic. And it was all there. And he never ever phoned it in. And I saw that right from getting to LA, like, this guy plays exactly the same, whether he's with Mick Jagger or in this little bar in Whittier, it didn't matter. So that was one, example of that was that was always really powerful for me. I had another one and now I forgot what it was. But anyway, that's the idea,
Yeah. I guess I've always wondered about what it must have been like to play with someone like Melissa Etheridge, because remember, I guess we're coming up on 20 years or something. There was this concert for New York, September 11th, and I was playing at a bar the night of that performance. In fact, I remember the band leader decided to make us go on right when Paul McCartney started, and Paul hadn't toured in years, and I was just sitting at the bar. All right, I have to do my gig, and I'm watching Paul going, I hope somebody's VHSing this right now, man.
Yeah.
There was a part of the night when Melissa Etheridge played, and she was just doing it solo with the ovation, and her mic cut out during the song. And she just kept singing so loud. Yeah. That it reverberated in the room, and you could hear her voice through the TV in the room.
And it was better.
The place went mental. But I just remember like seeing her laugh it off like a Mike Dodge, just sang harder, and I was like, that is so awesome. She must be such a great person to play behind. Because
it's exactly what she would have done. There was no mistakes with her, and she was a rock star, like, and she was, her I think one of her biggest idols was Springsteen, and most definitely, and she had that energy where if you've never seen Springsteen live, until you see him live, you don't really understand, and then you see him live and go, oh my God, he holds the crowd in the palm of, like, he can have 60,000 people in the palm of his hand, like, and that's what she learned from, and she and she had that. I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, Melissa doesn't like to rehearse, really. She likes to perform, and her shows are like the songs, like you can pretty much learn the album versions or live versions and stuff, and then make a couple tweaks in rehearsal, and then it's a little bit like the jammy thing. She's a little more like and so she. We did a couple. I got the gig, and then we did a couple rehearsals with her, and she would sing in rehearsal. But I'd never played with her or anything yet, and so it was like seeing her do her thing, kind of like, okay, it's going to be like this, you know, I see how she is and stuff like that. And I had this idea of like the way it was going to go. And then we did the first gig and that 12-string guitar was out here. She's holding it like this and just like, you know, like, it's just like, and the energy, it was like, it went up to like 500%, the energy. And I was like, oh my God, that is there's some like world-class rock star stuff going on right there, and I need to really dial it up right now. That was my like, you know, and then we went on, you know, on tour for the next couple of years. I played with her, and it was like, yeah, she was just, yeah, and there was no mistakes, and those little things that would happen, she would just play it off, and exactly what she's a pro. The mic goes down, you know, you just play it off, and you just roll with it, and you make it better, like that Jack White thing, you know. Where I can remember playing with Cornell too. And all the power going out in the venue and all the emergency lighting coming on one night. It was in St. Louis.
Right.
And, you know, so it's that weird disconcerting feeling where you're rocking and you're in the middle of a song and all of a sudden nothing. And then you see the lights come up and you're like, what's happening? And we realized the power had gone down. And Cornell, because he's a pro, turned around and looked at Sutter, the one acoustic instrument in the band, and goes, drum solo. And he just, you know, with then everybody in the room kind of,
well done.
And it's better, you know, it made a show that people remember. I remember bringing it up on one of my live streams a little while ago and somebody going, I was at that show. I remember that.
Wow,
like, yeah. And that's what you do, you know, and it's cool. I also, funny concert from New York, right. That was a long time ago now. It's 21 years ago, right? 2001. So it's 20 years ago. So I remember John Andrazik from Fight for Fighting played Superman, became kind of like an anthem, the song Superman for the you know, firefighters and emergency workers and so, you know, police and stuff when that whole thing happened, and the song really took off and his career started taking off. And right then I got a gig playing with him. So I toured with Fight for Fighting for like about a year after that. But I think I'd just gotten the gig and he was performing a concert for New York solo piano. And so I remember him playing and watching it. And afterwards I found out that in his in-ear was just blasting just like pink noise in his in-ear. And he's like, you get 3, 2 in his in-ears. I don't know if he took one out or what he did, or he had a minute, but he played the song and he just played it beautifully, and you never would have known, you know. And I found he's like, yeah, man, like there's chaos in my in-ears, like for that whole thing. And he just had to, like driving through a snowstorm, you know, like keep your eye on the center, and he did it because he's a pro, you know? Right.
Man,
so, no, they had a few technical problems that night, evidently.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So,
but Steve, that's what I tell people. Don't tell them. Don't telegraph it. It's a poker game. Keep that poker face.
Yeah.
You know?
Perform. Just roll with it.
What's funny is I've always got a kick out of, like, you could do a tour, you do 5-6 nights in a row, and the one night that for you is like it wasn't that good. The sound was shit. And maybe we were off to a bad start, or something just wasn't feeling it, or whatever. Yeah. That's the one that somebody goes, that was the best show of the tour. Okay. And I just never bum them out. I'm never like, no, it wasn't good. I'll go, great, you know, great.
Yeah. Over and over again.
Maybe we rallied, because rallying is an amazing thing as a group that you can do in a band. Like I had this one band, it was kind of like a lot of people, and we kept having this tour problem where, you know, we'd be at a venue and it's time to stop at 11 or 12, whatever. Like they want us out by 12:30, so you got to hard stop at 11.
Sure.
And I would do the set lists. So I kept shortening them because I kept finding that we'd run at this point where it'd be like, well, we have 7 songs left on the list, and we only have time for about 4. Right. And so it'd be like, well, I can't jettison my children here. You know, it would become this like drama. And then they want to, well, why don't we get off stage and we'll come back? Oh, well, that's just going to drain more time. But if you played it to the end of the clock, then the audience would all want this encore. They want the overtime. So what I started to do was put a line like, okay, these are the last 2 songs. Put a line and then put a little etch that only the band knew about, like this, because the singer would just go off. But I noticed he didn't look far enough ahead. So if I could just jump the line, then we would be putting him at what he thought was the end, but still in the end zone of the night. So the venue isn't mad. Because, you know, some venues you could play till whenever, and other ones have like a hard call. And after that, union has to be paid time and a half. And there's all these other things to consider. It's not just, well, of course we want to play more, but we technically don't want to play more. That's not the job. And
Yeah.
I remember doing that. And the funny thing was that we would sometimes, the only way to put in motion this bigger plan of how to get off the stage, because the manager will go, I don't know how to do it. I can't get him off when he's on there. Said, I have a plan. And I called it United Front. As soon as we ended that song where that line was, like, oh, United Front, and the whole band would go, and they'd just walk off. And he'd be up there going, let's play another, it became kind of part of it. And I think at first he just didn't know why we'd left, but after a couple of nights, he just went with it. And it was like, it was making the show tighter by trimming the fat.
Yeah, sure.
Also, it was because it had to be a united front. The band had to all say together, we are not mutinying. We're just taking a breather and we'll come right back. And that, you know what I mean? And it's just the dynamic of that band.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny learning the dynamic of all the gigs. Is somebody asked me once, because I played a bunch of bands of like within a few months, and they're like, how do you remember all the songs? Like, oh, that's not the hard part. The hard part is remembering which part of Spinal Tap that particular band likes to quote. Because if you put the right joke at the right moment, you get laughs, guaranteed. But if you put the wrong quote in that context, they're gonna go, they look at you sideways. That's the key. Remember the jokes.
Keep it in perspective.
Right.
What's important?
Spinal Tap is definitely like to me, that's the blueprint. I've lived, I'm sure you have too, like scene after scene, I go, oh, hey, that's happened.
Oh my God, totally. Yeah.
Lost time on stage.
Well, I'd probably be more emotional if I wasn't so heavily medicated. Yeah.
When the guitar gets all the feedback and he just launches it down.
Yeah. Or when he's doing the solo and he's tuning the violin and he's like making chaos noise and then he tunes the good
that was brilliant. They just they hit it so well in that movie.
Oh,
and on top of it that they wrote the music. I saw them on their first reunion tour in the early 2000s. It's like
I saw them play a NAMM show around 90 or 91. I remember Steve Lukather got up and played. Like they just did a one-off show like at NAMM. Yeah, it was awesome. It was like right up front. It was like, I have pictures of it. I think I took pictures on like an old school like disposable camera.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is amazing. I've seen Spinal Tap live. This is so cool.
And when I saw them, it was in what's that place in New York? Radio City Music Hall. And they did a lot of the shtick, which was great. Was all the songs had second verses and bridges. They were complete songs.
Right.
They opened they opened for themselves as the Tensmen.
Oh, cool.
With the whole thing. And then they said, sorry, we don't have money for the Cocoons. And they did they did the Stonehenge. But it was the show was sponsored by Depends diapers. So the Stonehenge monument came down with a pair of Depends. Unbelievable.
That's awesome.
It was so hysterical.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but I was going to ask you about something on that. Yeah, I'll remember later. Anyway,
I wonder if we've gone about 3 hours and 10 minutes. I got to use the bathroom pretty soon.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if we should split. But is there any? I wonder if we should take any. Was there like questions or comments or anything?
Most things you kind of answered, and a lot of people I have here have mostly just said like, just really nice like comments, like I'll read you some.
Great.
This is a very deep conversation. Thanks for this. Really honest and open. Rare to come across online. That was nice.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rob. Jason said, you have, of course, owned several guitars in your life. Is there one you pick up more than others?
Well, I would have to say my signature guitar these days, because it's kind of the it's right here. It's basically kind of an amalgamation of everything that that I need to do gigs. So if there's one guitar that I take or one that I lean on, it's this one, because it's just super versatile and stuff. So yeah, it's mainly this guitar. It's because I could do whatever I wanted with it really when I designed it. So it's just really versatile. But having said that, I've got some great my old 335 I love because it's just got so much character, and some other guitars, my old Strat, so it just depends on the job, but yeah.
Cool.
It's really,
yeah. I'm waiting for my my birthday present to myself this year. I turned 40, and I ordered it. I'm being very patient because a lot of the companies are very delayed with things.
That's right.
A 339.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's like just right. It's a little smaller, but
exactly. Yeah, it's funny. Yogi used to use one of those a lot with Chris Cornell. He had 339. I remember it was a nice little guitar. I mean, it was cool. It had a Bigsby on it. It was really sharp looking. It was red. Like really liked it actually. You know, nice guitar.
He's a tall chap, right? He's on the shorter side.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember. Okay, because I'm 5'4", 5", I guess, on a good day. And I remember noticing like that guy's rocking really hard, but he totally looks like he needs a man maker to take a photo with the band. He's stand in a box.
Yeah. He's pretty tall. He's taller than I am, that's for sure. I remember. I always used to call him Monkey Paws. He's got great big hands, and he'd come over and put his arm around you, and he had this great. He's got hands made for playing guitar. Like when you see Jimi Hendrix or Paul Gilbert, a lot of these great guitar players, they've got really like long fingers, and they've really got like power in their hands.
When they get the thumb over the neck, that's
just kind of hands made for playing music or piano or something. Like,
Speaking of, do you play piano? Is that
I don't. I'd love to learn. I have this like fantasy of buying an upright at some point, and taking lessons from a nice little old lady or something, and learning how to play piano. In
my area, I have to say somebody gets rid of upright every 2-3 months.
Did you ever see that video of Billy Joel like recently out on there's this video that was going around where somebody had their phone and he's walking down the street and there's a piano somebody's throwing out on the street. Like, and he's walking down the street in Long Island or something, and there was a piano on the curb, like kind of screwed up. And he just goes walking by. He's got a toque on, I think, it's like cold out. And he starts playing it. It's freaking Billy Joel, and he's like kicking ass. And he's like,
himself.
He's like, this is a perfectly good piano. He's just some guy walking by on the street that started filming him playing. And he's like, perfectly good piano. It's got nice action.
Right.
It's like somebody probably did go pick up that piano right then. Right. Like, I got this piano that Billy Joel said was,
I have an organ that someone gave away. All I had to do was be able to get it. I have a Pathfinder, so I could fit it. But my son plays piano, but the organ is so hip because it's got the pedals and the volume swell stuff. But I couldn't believe when I first brought it down here, someone was giving it away. But it'd been in this house next to this temple. I guess it was part of their congregation whenever no one had used it. So it works fine. And it's like it's an entertainer or something. That's a really kind of common one people have had. So if I needed spare parts, they're not hard to find, but everything works. And I just feel like every house should have a piano and a drum set.
I wish. Drums are so fun and freeing to play. I'm terrible, but I like to sit down and jam on them, and the piano would be great. My buddy Jurgen that plays in Government Mule, he found a bass amp in the trash. Like he was driving by and he saw an amp sticking out of a garbage can in an alley or whatever, and he used that amp as it was the only bass amp he owned for years. He literally found it hanging out in the garbage. He didn't own one at the time, and he just took it, and then he had the cabinet or whatever. It was an Ampeg solid state. Or not Ampeg, acoustic. It was an acoustic bass amp from like the 70s.
Oh wow!
Just a head that
Right.
Yeah, so funny. Found it in the trash.
I went out to lunch with a friend of mine up in Nyack, which is a nice, just north of the city, really kind of cool artist town. And we were walking, and I saw a box of Guitar Player magazine, and sticking out was this Korg pedal board. And I went, I bet all it needs is a power source. I brought it home. That's all it needs. Linked it right up to the the daisy chain, and the thing is like it works great. You never know what you'll see.
Exactly.
Right. But I also have too many. Like I know I have 3 basses, 6 or 7 guitars, 10 drum sets. It's gotten over the years. You just accumulate things.
Oh God. Yeah.
And in the last year, I didn't need the touring stuff, so I lend it to students, and so I have stuff in different places. Cause I'm like, please play it. How many guitars do you have now these days? I
don't know. I'm not sure. It's too many. Too many. I'm going through a process right now of a kind of reckoning of I've really organized my space and got I had somebody help me that's good at such things and get my more organized. And now I can look at it and kind of know what I've got, and then maybe start selling some things that I'm not using, because I feel bad when I had a moment of many years ago of realizing that accumulating things isn't a good thing necessarily, and to not hoarding and material possessions and things like that. So don't want to let that start to run your life. And
Right.
once you start paying for, if you've got like multiple storage spaces and things, like, okay, it's getting out of hand. Like, so that whole simplify your life thing, I got to get a little more, like, even looking at my space right now, I got to clean up in here today. Something I got to do before I start doing any more in here. But anyway, yeah. So I'm working on it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, the same. It's like I have some things I would get rid of for sentimental reasons.
Right.
Sure. Like, I guess I'm going to show you one of my funniest guitars. I think it's funny. My brother gave this to me because he doesn't really play anymore, but he built it. Like he got
cool.
put it together, and
wow.
And he put a blue LED in it.
Crazy.
And I was like, when am I ever going to get another fly? It's actually really light. Acrylic, and it's some brand that's not really that Galveston.
Okay. Wow, crazy.
Definitely could use better pickups and needs a little bit of work, but otherwise it's kind of like, and it's my drop guitar. I leave it in usually D standard or E flat, but it's one of the guitars I'm like, yeah, my brother gave it to me. And when people see it though, they're like, dude, that guitar is awesome. I guess it's pretty funny.
That's great. Yeah.
I have a Flying V ukulele that I had to have because it was a Flying V, and it's just funny that you got to be inspired by your gear,
You do. It's funny. You remind me. I should run soon because I'm going to pee my pants if I don't. But I'll tell you. I just got to tell you because I'm enjoying our conversation so much. You keep reminding me of things. Chris Cornell had this idea. Like, he was a real prankster, and he was really funny. But he had this kind of like really funny sense of humor where he would like play. Like, I can remember him telling me a story about doing a Soundgarden interview once where he made the interviewer be on the other side of a curtain, like, because he thought, well, let's just mess with them, like, seem like we're really mysterious and we don't want to see people face to face, so they can ask us. It was like Backstage, where they had things cordoned off with curtains. He's like, they have to talk to us through the curtain, and he's just totally taking the piss out. Like, sure, the guy thought he was insane, but anyway, he's like, he had this idea. He's like, I want to do a signature Flying V acoustic. Like, he's like, just to be like, just completely ridiculous. Like, get a flying. He's like, I don't even think it's going to sound terrible. Like a Flying V acoustic, the body's just not going to work for, but he's like, I'm totally going to do it. And he's like, I'm going to, like, I'm like, you can't seriously go through with that. And then anyway, I ended up looking online and seeing like Dean had already done it. Like, Dean had a flying. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, man. They've already made the Flying V acoustic.
Well, everybody seems to be into the new Jazzmaster acoustics.
I have one of those. Yeah. Oh, it's actually at home, but
seemed like out of nowhere, I didn't even know about them, and all of a sudden 5-6 of my friends all have them, and it's like, did they just give them all out? Because people really
got a lot of folks who make videos for them. Yeah, that's kind of how they rolled on that one. And you know what? They're really good. Like, I have the Strat too, and they're a great tool. People, they're, I guess for some folks they're polarizing. Like some, it's they're because they're a little crazy looking and stuff. And the Telly maybe was the one that makes the most sense to people. But I don't know. They're actually really great tools. Like, they play like an electric.
Right.
They don't feed back. You can crank them up on stage. They're obviously really portable. It's small. Yeah. I used to use a Chet Atkins many years ago, a Gibson Chet Atkins, which kind of had a bigger Les Paul sort of shape.
Yeah.
And it was a solid body acoustic. And I took it on tour. I did a whole tour with that guitar where I toured South America and stuff. It was great because I could throw it in a little gig bag. And I had it in a pedal board, and I plugged it, and it sounded really good. I still have that guitar. As a matter of fact, since I moved my stuff around, it's here now. So I want to go check it out because I haven't seen it forever. But it was in another storage for a while. But there's a great guitar. So I'm not at all. Well, it depends on the gig. If you're every gig, some gigs you take that clear Flying V, it might be the exact right guitar to take to an audition. And there's other ones where it's not going to be the right guitar to take. So so it's like,
I have all these snare drums because you never know. It's like you never know what tie you got to wear. What to use, and you do want to have a lot of things that give you options. But at the end of the day, it's the wizard, not the wand. That's
right.
So, so I think ending on that, but humbly saying, so thank you so much for your time and energy, and just
absolutely. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the great, it's great getting to meet you. I feel like we're buddies now. So
yeah, same here. We'll have to go get a cup of coffee one day if you're on the East Coast.
Yeah. Definitely.
If we can do it again, maybe see if we can talk more gear. I feel like I didn't ask you enough gear questions, but you already cover so much of that. So thank you for like kind of just following me on this little nostalgic, like just talking about being on the road with these amazing people, because that's just so incredible just to hear it. And it's so inspiring too.
It's also, you've done a ton of work, and it's interesting when you would say things, and I almost like feel like finishing your sentence. It's amazing how, the same kinds of things come up over and over again. And there really is, it's just, the older you get, it comes full circle, and it's like these experiences, you know what I mean? And it's just interesting, it's like how hopefully younger players can take something from that and not make the same mistakes that I made. Stay in school, kids.
Right.
No, I don't know.
Don't have a backup plan. Have a backup plan.
Yeah, I never had a backup plan. Sutter actually used to say, I remember him saying, like, it's like we gambled with our lives, and we kind of did. I mean, part of being a musician is, the last thing I'll say is just basically like, you do have to love it so much that it owns you. Don't do it for the fame or the money. Do it because you just can't you can't imagine doing anything else besides playing music.
If I knew the world was ending, I'd be at my equipment, my world behind there.
There you go.
Yeah, and I think that it's brought all the greatest things in my life have come through music. I met my wife, and I think it's exciting to hear from a player of your level. You're not jaded about it. You've done it full tilt, and at any point, if you wanted to do something else, I don't think there's something that you would do unless you really loved it. So that passion's really inspiring. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, man. You bet. And you're right. I still feel like I'm just getting started, which is kind of weird, but I feel like sometimes I feel like all the stuff I've been through and like, stuff in life. And it's just like, and by the same token, I don't really feel any different than I did when I was 14. So it's weird. It's like, I'm still excited, to do this stuff. So it's pretty cool. Music's wonderful that way. There's always something else to learn, some more to explore, another gig to go do, another song to write.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing to do. Yeah, I'm with you, man. Well, thank you. I guess we'll stay on for a minute as asked by Sass.
Yeah.
Maybe we're gonna say goodnight.